Welcome to Best in Faction,
a podcast about playing Warhammer 40k in
when
Tacoma.
you're old. I'm Colin.
I'm Mitch.
And I'm Chuck.
And we have Hank here with us, too. So, hi, everybody. Welcome to our special episode of Best in Faction titled Tacoma Open, Only a Janitor Can Stop Another Janitor. I can't possibly think of them being anything else when people keep calling them custodians. I can't. There's just nothing I can handle there. Anywho,
Just
so
call them
big giant
custodes. People love that.
Yes, custodes is better. Custards. Or stodes is what a lot of people call them at the tournament. Or stode.
I call them shiny boys.
Okay. That sounds like you're being mildly offensive, but I know you're not. Shiny boys.
Fair.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the Tacoma Open. We'll talk about what the event was like. I was there, Chuck was there, Hank was there. Mitch tried, but real life stopped him.
Yep.
What, Mitch?
I said, yup.
Well, normally it stops me, so stopping someone else actually feels comfortable.
At least some variety, at least.
Yeah. Exactly. So we did get to go. It was a heck of a good time. Before we dive into that and we talk about Hank's triumphant second place finish, I want to just update you guys a little bit on Charity Hammer because we're getting down to it and I haven't started the publicity for it yet, so I need to do that this week. Charity Hammer is 9/14 to 9/17. For those that don't,
Let me write that down. Hold on. What? When?
September 14th to September 17th. Because some people are newer to the network, let me just share with you guys. Charity Hammer is our annual 40K party that's here at my place. It is a Thursday afternoon to Sunday afternoon nonstop streaming fest. We don't stop. Some people don't sleep. Others do. There's going to be a giant tournament that you guys will get to see every round and every game of. The important thing about Charity Hammer is that the people we invite are both good, very good at, not just good at the game. We invite people who are very good at the game, and more importantly, are fantastic advocates for the game. And so the idea of that is that you get the best people to watch and learn from and enjoy. And what we've done in the past that's been not as good, it turns out, is we've had commentary from really good players on every game. The problem when you do a million games and you put commentary on all of them is that it's impossible to build a mechanic that keeps the commentators up to speed. And more important than that, what the feedback was that we've gotten is that the hanging out with the guys while they do Charity Hammer is part of the appeal for the audience. So we're taking all the commentation away. And the players are going to be the ones talking on every game. Even the tournament games, the players are going to talk through what's happening and what they're doing because that's what people like and that's what we're going to do. We're going to do 2 streams this time rather than 3, with the focus of those 2 streams having all the camera angles and being more complicated. Complicated is the wrong word. Easier to follow, easier to see what's going on. So we're scaling a little bit back on the amount of content we're creating by a stream, and instead we're going to provide much higher quality content. So why are we doing all this?
Well, and who is going to be running one of those streams?
I think I know that, but I haven't heard from him. So let's not.
Okay.
I believe it's still happening, but I'm not confident shouting that out at the moment. So we are. The reason we do this is to raise money for Child's Play. Child's Play is a charity put on by the Penny Arcade guys, if you know them. And it's specifically for children's hospitals, and now they've started doing domestic violence shelters. They have stuff in Europe, in Australia. Here, it's a massive charity, and sick kids needing toys and video games and technology and things like that is a thing that a bunch of gamers that play toys like they're tiny children can really get behind. So we've done this for 4 years. This will be the 5th, and we've raised over $100,000. So this is probably, without any competition, the thing I do each year that I care the most about. We are fortunate people that can afford to play this hobby. Lots of people in the world can't afford to play this hobby. And to take some of that fortune that we have and sharing it with people that need it more is certainly in the spirit of Best in Tabletop and absolutely in the spirit of Best in Faction. So 9/14 to 9/17, we've got some amazing people coming. That roster will be out soon. Real interesting guys. We've shifted even younger than we did when the TNG guys got added in. A number of the people that are coming are in their early 20s this year, and some of the older veterans are not making it. So the same level of competency will be here, but at a much lower average age.
But that's just the cycle of Warhammer, right? The young guys who have no commitment, who just got out of college and have good paying jobs, go really hard into the competitive scene. And then the old crusty guys who have commitments and stuff are like, yeah, I don't have time to put that much. I can't do that now.
Well, but like even the older guy, the slightly older guys like Ben Jurek are going to every tournament right now. Man, on Facebook, I every weekend that guy's like, now I'm in Vegas. Now I'm in San Antonio. Now I'm in, like, what are you even doing?
I mean, he does live in Vegas.
Fine. That's fair. But still. Anywho. So that's Charity Hammer. Lots of more information coming on that. I'll send out a Facebook invite so people can follow it that way. And it's just going to be the most fun that we've ever had. So that's Charity Hammer. Let's talk about the Tacoma Open. We had the fortune of the biggest and earliest 10th edition tournament being 2 hours from me, 45 minutes from Hank, 30 minutes from Chuck. How'd I do?
Yep.
Thereabouts, yeah.
Okay. So they got to sleep in their own beds, which I'm very, very envious of. But 2 hours each way, especially when I might have to play in the shadow round, seemed like a disaster. Like, finish the shadow round at, what was it? What time did you get home from the shadow round, Hank?
1 a.m., something like that.
So I would have gotten home closer to 2. And then I would have had to leave at 6 a.m. to get back to the tournament. So, yeah, that was not a thing.
Anyway, Colin sleeping in his car in Tacoma.
Yeah,
yeah, right? It's better than a hallway in San Francisco, I think.
Maybe.
Yes, definitely, because there are no angry partners. Like,
because my wife isn't there. That's what you're saying is the big difference.
And Lisa's not there, having to sleep in the hallway. Like, all of that made it a lot worse, because we're like, hey, we're going to this tournament for us, and then you'll get to have this great. Oh no, it's just going to be a nightmare.
Well, and then Lisa organized it, right? So the whole time she's feeling like it's her fault that we're sleeping in the hallway. That was just terrible.
Yep.
If you don't know what we're talking about, it's like one of the very first episodes of Best in Faction. Anywho, yeah, it's a very deep cut. So Tacoma Open ended up being about 360 players. It was going to be an 8-round event. It was 9 if you did well, as typical for events. If you do well, you get punished with an additional game. So that was that. They used the new GW train that was shown off in the tournament pack. We'll talk about that for sure. And then everybody thinks they knew what the meta was going to be like. Everybody thought that. And you could say, well, the Tacoma Open had the first, second place were Custodes, so clearly Custodes are the best army. Except that their win rate across all of the weekend was not as good. And Eldar won 1, 2, and 3 at the second biggest tournament, and Genestealer Cult won 1, 2, and 3 at the third biggest tournament. So if you said that Genestealer Cult, Eldar, and Custodes are the best armies in the game, I have a great deal of data to support that. But if you think then Knights did incredibly well everywhere that they were. I think Knights are just we're just going to do well all the time army.
That's they're a high end gatekeeper.
Definitely.
Yes.
High end.
If you did not tech for them, you do not get to beat them, is kind of my impression. So I have to step away for a little bit, but I'd love to talk about the terrain first, because I think that in 9th edition and 8th edition, a lot of the drama was about terrain. In 8th edition, everybody did different terrain. Nova's terrain was different than WTC terrain. What, Mitch?
I thought it was about like water bottles and,
yeah, right. So WTC terrain, Nova terrain, and ITC terrain in 8th edition were wildly different, and it caused us to play different games from each other. In 9th edition, we had GW terrain, which was very different from anything anyone else was playing, and player place terrain, which was literally a Band-Aid for the terrain rules, and lots of us didn't like it. So now we have this tournament pack that says this is how big the obscuring footprints are, and this is where they go. And let's start with Chuck talking about what that experience was like, and I'll be right back.
Well, just in case people aren't familiar with it and they are familiar with the last GW train, essentially they took the giant blocks of the larger, I think they were like 12 by 12 blocks, and they cut them in half. So now there are more pieces on the table, but also there's not this giant piece. And those giant pieces were very difficult to hide behind because you then had to cross the whole thing. So it was really difficult for close combat. The new one, they've split those up, spread them out, They've also condensed them towards the center,
Mhm.
making it really difficult for very long range firepower to have very many angles. And if you're
Yeah.
careful and you check the angles between the buildings, you can say like this little cone here is a no-go because I will get blown up, and you can
Mhm.
hide very effectively.
Oh yeah, definitely.
There are a few armies out there that we might have just been talking about that don't give a crap if you are hidden well or not, like knights.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and they will just shoot you anyway.
Mhm.
But in general, I found it actually in most of my games that this is really pivotal. I was playing orcs. I'm playing mostly close combat, and I very
Mhm.
much used that terrain.
Mhm.
I guess to speak to this is actually huge in my mind. I feel like towering and direct fire really destroys my army.
Mhm.
But if towering and direct fire just isn't there, I really destroy my opponent's army. Like if you
Sure.
just remove those rules, the orcs sort of become S tier, which is probably not true because custodes would be like, no.
Yeah.
But
Custodes were like, well, you have literally no rule of any kind that gives you
Yeah.
any game into us.
you're like,
Yeah.
you're cute. We ignore you entirely. Oh, okay, thanks. But I think it's really quite good. It's
Mhm.
very interesting to play around. I've played a lot of games on it that are just just having fun and trying to explore the game
Mhm.
and maneuvering around them. It creates different little battles, hotspots,
Mhm.
and it also very intelligently placed with the objectives. So that in general, the objectives are drawing you to interesting parts of the battlefield. So I think
Mhm.
Fully agree.
it's really probably the best thing I've seen in quite a while.
Oh yeah.
What do you think?
Like,
Mike?
so overall, my impression of the terrain is it does an amazing job at, first of all, massive asterisk next to any army that has a decent amount of towering. However, I will say to GW's credit, we got there, and right before round one, they just did a tournament-wide announcement. Guys, we sat down and we tried to nail all of these doors closed and all these windows closed, but it just can't be done. So for the event, treat all ruin walls as though they are opaque and you can't see through them no matter
On
how
every
many
floor.
on every floor.
Yeah.
And that was transformative because it meant if you had infantry or lower to the ground profile vehicles, you could actually snug them up inside the ruins and hide from towering.
It's because they all had roofs, right? Everybody
Yes.
had even one-story buildings had the roof, like the platform you can stand on if you're on the second floor. And so even that, I'm not good at like 2.5 inches or 3, like even that little space as an overlap meant that the angle of the knight trying to see you was blocked at that angle. So I could hire I could hide night spinners, I could hide kind of whatever I wanted. I couldn't hide all 5 of my tanks, but I certainly could hide some of them on every table.
Yeah. So even against towering, you had some ability to hide your high value, high threat things. And in general, my experience was okay. In most of my games, someone is just completely, I can't hear anything.
Yeah, I think that's Mitch.
Okay.
Oh, there it goes. Okay.
Sorry, a semi drove by and used air braking.
Got it. Okay, cool. Anyways, my experience was on the tables. I can hide anything I want to hide turn one. And because the tables are dense enough, I can generally keep whatever I want to keep hidden as I approach until I choose to want to expose it. And that's actually something that was in common throughout all my games, with one glaring exception on my games because someone wasn't quite as careful with placement as they could have been. I very rarely got to alpha strike anybody, and I almost never got to attack anything that my opponent didn't decide to expose to me first. There was a lot of terrain-enabled agency on players' parts. It allowed them to stay hidden until they chose to interact, as opposed to showing up, losing the roll to go first, and then being interacted with, and they have nothing to say about that. And I think that's an amazing point in favor of this terrain pack.
I have a follow-up question real quick for Hank.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead, French.
Yeah.
Do you feel like with the ruling that GW did for all openings being blocked? So one, I have a question there. How did they handle so like sloping? Like there are ruins that have walls that are very irregular and have like a window with a corner of it removed out. How did they handle any of that?
So it never came up in any of my games, mostly because my opponents heard the ruling and they were basically just like, okay, so we're basically just treating these walls as effectively opaque for the most part, and they just kind of went with the benefits of the doubt on most of those things. Also, I don't have a lot of big stuff that I need to hide. It's all custodian, so I'm just like hiding.
So you weren't, The other question has to do with Overwatch, and do you and it's for everyone, but do you feel like this terrain layout mitigates the issue with Overwatch, where it feels like Overwatch can just be a really powerful, like the 24-inch and you know, some units being able to do it more than once? Like, do you feel like that this terrain layout is also helping mitigate that issue?
I think that to a certain extent it can. So it's very possible if you have an army built to Overwatch multiple times in a turn and get real value out of it, you can just put yourself aggressively forward and go, I'm on the objectives, I have all of this stuff, I have totally exposed myself to you, and you can come out and you can start, punching me, but I'm going to get my Overwatch for you doing it. That you can totally position yourself to do it. So I don't think I don't think it sets it up to where you can do that safely, but I think it gives you enough mitigation. However, the Knight Valiant and towering Overwatch value pieces, like the guided Wraith Knight, that is always going to be an asterisk. Mostly because freaking it doesn't actually matter how clever you are. There is no way that you can deny Overwatch on a charge move to something that is a vehicle because of the way that big guns never tire work. Even if you manage to block the line of sight to every part of the movement, every part of the charge movement, because you can Overwatch at the beginning or end of any of those movements, you just go, cool, you have successfully completed in melee range of me. And because I have big guns never tire, I can fire while I'm engaged. I'm now going to hit you with my flamer, even though you're in base-to-base contact with me. So that is something that people should be aware of.
That's a great little. This is something I was talking about before the podcast started. There's a lot of these little things in 10th edition, these obscure nuances that I feel like can really catch people out. So thank you. Cool. That was my advice.
So I'll share my thoughts on the train. I really like the lack of firing lanes through the middle of the table, like Chuck talked about. And I like that infantry feel a lot better than they did. When we started playing 10th edition, we weren't playing with enough obscuring terrain. And we were like, why would people not just take parking lots? And how come Nidzilla is so good? Yeah. And it turns out on the GW train, Nidzilla is terrible. It's not terrible, but if you are good at move blocking, it is not going to do anything to you. Yesterday, Chuck and I played an incredibly fun game of Tyranids versus Orcs, and the entirety of the game was me move blocking the stuff that he had that couldn't go through walls. And it was interesting, right, Chuck? I don't mean that I was making Chuck's game bad. Just I was move blocking him the way that I should, and he was working around it
instead of me choosing, which is good, right? Like it's just good play.
Yeah. So that was really interesting, and being able to have infantry do stuff, my warp spiders, my rangers, stuff like that, being able to have them do things because they can get around behind stuff was really neat. The downside of the train for me was that every single game I played, I had the world's largest L somewhere in my deployment zone, always in the corner of my deployment zone, and I had tanks that basically fire and fade. Right? Like I have tanks that want to see you and then hide behind their castle. And so in every single game, even the game that I shouldn't have, which we'll talk about, in every single game, I deployed my army roughly the same way for the entire tournament. And I hated that, and it drove me crazy, but there was never any other way to do it. There was never any other way to hide tanks than to put them behind the L. Yeah. And so I hated that. And it really, really wasn't fun. But at the same time, I think that the train was doing such good things that I can't really be mad at it.
You also had a randomization spike there. There were several different kinds of train layouts that they spread throughout the tournament. And then
there were 4 altogether.
They'd hope people would sit in different spots. And I think you just hit like the same.
No, I played on different train. They just all had that L. Because if you look at the tables GW has made, I think it's 3 of the 5 have that L.
Yeah. I played on several that did not have the L.
Okay.
but I think it's a bit of an RNG.
Yeah, I just think that L is much bigger than it needs to be. Is really what my criticism is. I feel like it's entirely too good at letting armies castle. That said, I found the fly change to be huge and enormous.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, it's almost never good to fly over a wall. Like the math is almost never good. You're almost always driving around the wall. And I think that terrain actually is incredibly harsh on vehicles unless you're fire prisms. And the fire prism's ability to just move 14 made it really easy to get one fire prism to see and then the other ones to get angles on that fire prism so that all three could see. And that felt very powerful, but not in the way I wanted it to be. Like, I felt like everybody else's tanks were working really hard to get angles on me, and the fire prisms are like, and I'm over here, and I could see you. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
And what if I phantasm the guy that exposed himself?
Exactly.
Well, and also, what if you just had like one of the best other anti-tank profiles? So you're guaranteed to kill where they find you. Even if they find you, they're not guaranteed to take you down.
Right. The fire prism is actually, and I have thought a lot about this. The fire prism is the most broken thing in the Eldar rules.
I would overall agree.
That's what I think, and it's not because it's good in every situation, because it's not. It's actually they're actually not particularly good against custodes, as an example. They're fine.
Yeah.
They kill custodes, which is the whole point, but they don't do it at an efficiency that's worth the amount of points they take up against custodes. But in every other game, they just kill something. Oh, you brought a knight, it's dead. Oh, you brought a wraith knight, it's dead. You have other tanks, they're all dead. Oh, you have a super heavy shadow sword, like in one of my games, it's dead. They just kill everything, and they do it with fast movement, and they do it with jinking and hiding. So absolutely the thing in the Eldar army that I thought was the most powerful in the course of my games, and very much so because of the GW train in big part.
This is part of why for the fire prism ability to work, they should have to be within range of each other. It has, they have to see
each other.
No, but they should have to be within 6 inches of each other. You want to go fly out and get some crazy angle, you need to expose all 3 tanks. One can phantasm back, but you can't. But you have to actually have some risk.
I think 12 is probably the distance that I would like to see, because it allows you to kind of sort of hide them. Because I have no problem with them doing the move out, shoot all 3, back up, and be safe one time. I just want enemy movement throughout the game to make that progressively a harder and harder thing. It's not something they can just keep recycling over and over and over and over again.
So I think that there's a couple changes that need to happen that I think address that better. One of which is that Fire and Fade being 2 CP and Phantasm being 1 CP is hilariously dumb, because Phantasm is just better than Fire and Fade. So they should trade those. Phantasm should be 2 CP and Fire and Fade should be 1. That makes a huge difference in how this works. And the other thing, more than them being able to see each other, I think that they don't need an extra reroll per hit and wound. I think that is silly. And then I don't even know why they have that. And then they still need to go up in points. Those are the changes that I would make to the Fire Prism.
So for my I thought a lot about this. For Eldar in general, I would like to see Phantasm and Fire and Fade CP stay the same. However, what I would like to see is Phantasm changed to be non-vehicle, non-monster.
Interesting. I like that change. I mean, if I want to win as Eldar, I don't like that change. But I actually found, and we'll talk about this at the end of the tournament, I found the Eldar list I brought was powerful in the wrong ways for me, and I got bored. So that's a thing that we'll talk about. Okay, so we talked about terrain. I think in general we give it an A. We're all very pleased with it. My only criticism was how similar my games felt. But remember, we're about to talk about the fact that I also played 3.5 Eldar mirrors. So that makes my games a little bit different. So let's now talk about what we took to the tournament and why we took it. And let's start with Chuck.
All right. So I brought the boys. Let's go through the list real quick. I brought Mazrag. He's required. He is far too good a piece to not bring to every work game you're playing. And then I brought a...
Why is that, Chuck?
Well, let's talk about toughness to start. He's T10, 9 wounds, 3 up, 4 up, with a 4 up feel no pain. and he's eligible for the -1 to be wounded strat. I launch him into my opponent regularly, and I'm like, what? Do something. And they spend their whole turn getting rid of him, and that means like whole squads of Squig Hog Riders don't get wrecked. Like he is unbelievable. And then on the output, like I put him into a monolith, and he did like 18 of the 24 damage to it. He goes up to strength or damage 6 and 5 or 5 and 4 or something like that in Titanic things, which are popular these days. And he's still just +1 to damage on regular vehicles, so he does a ton. He gets a few mortal wounds out of all of that as well, so all good news. Then so I bring him. I bring his little buddy, who's another beast boss on Squigosaur. I made a mistake. He's supposed to have the Headwappa Skill Choppa. I left it on one of the knobs from a different build. So I played it on the knob, but it should have definitely been over on him. Then 2 Squig knobs for the Squig Boys. 2 squads of Squig Boys to go with them. 2 Beast Snaga bosses on foot. And then 2 squads of Beast Snagas to go with them. And then trucks for those to go into. Couple squads of Storm Boys, couple squads of bikes. Squad of Gretchen. And then a 22-man squad of Gretchen and Zogwart to go in them, so that you get the scouting really difficult to kill in close combat Gretchen. That's all the pieces. Functionally, it is all gas, go, charge your opponent, mob the objectives, hold on as long as I can, try to come out with all the points, because you don't ever get to participate in the center of the table. That works with some people, and sometimes you get tabled too certain, and it does not work the other way.
Okay. I took Eldar because, as we've talked about before, the flow chart of what army does Colin take starts with, are Eldar broken? That's the first question on the flow chart, and if the answer is yes, I take Eldar. My army, my Eldar time. Yeah, my Eldar army is gorgeous. I love the models. I love the paint job my wife and I have done, and I almost always like the way they play. Speed and fragile is very comfortable for me in the way that I play 40K. As Hank and Chuck will tell you, I'm very good at hiding my things so they don't die. So that's what I really enjoy. So I took Eldar, and I took absolutely what I felt was the most broken thing. I actually would change this to make it better, and we'll talk about that later. So I took the Autarch Wayleaper, just put him at the top of every Eldar list, unless you're playing Inari and you can't. Make him the Warlord. He gives you a CP every turn. That alone is worth his points. But the fact that he's also a lone operative that moves really fast, and you can give him an assault gun so that he can advance after he moves really fast, he's incredible. Lone operative, so you can stand on an objective out in the open against some armies. I sent him on adventures where he phantasmed away from people all the time. Really, really good piece. That's relatively, for Eldar, is relatively good in combat. Since they've decided that our army is bad in combat, it was nice that he was relatively good in combat. Farseer on foot. I have a Wraith Knight in my list, so Farseer on foot's required. He's got the -1 to wound, and then he also has the 6s, turn 6s into, or turn Phaetus into 6s. Some people were cheating this. If you have multiple Farseers, you still only do it once per turn. I heard many complaints at the tournament about all our players cheating on that. Farseer Skyrunner is the guy that gives out guide. Oh, by the way, the Farseer on foot is not in a unit. I did not take Guardians. With Fate Dice being limited to once per phase, you literally don't need more Fate Dice than you start with. I did not run out in any game. So what I did instead of the Guardians is I gave him the Phoenix Gem. And the idea there is he's hiding the whole game anyways. And if he's going to get indirected, I at least get him for 2 turns, which is all I need from the Wraith Knight in a lot of those games where indirect fire is a problem. Really, indirect fire means I'm playing against Eldar or I'm playing against Guard. I have no fear of beating Guard, so it's really a Night Spinner question.
Yeah.
Farseer Skyrunner, I put him with 3 Wind Riders. I had him with Warlocks originally. Wind Riders are actually cheaper and weirdly more durable. That's a whole debate we could have, but the big thing is for 80 points, you get 3 Shuriken Cannons, and the Farseer himself shoots well. So you have this little fast-moving unit that shoots really, really hard at 24 inches. That was a really good skirmishing piece for me, where turn 3 or turn 4 that would come out and start killing things when I could pick the angles that it was on. It only died in 1 game, so that was pretty good. Then I took Illick, the guy that makes a ranger unit untargetable outside of 12. I think he's actually cute and not actually necessary. I don't know that rangers are necessary. But I did take a unit of rangers to go with him. I took 3 fire prisms because that's what you do. I think with Eldar, you have to have a plan for knights in particular. And I think that fire prisms are so good, and the fact that they just wreck that matchup is really a big deal.
Yeah.
I took 2 night spinners. That's the most that people are taking. A lot of the Eldar lists have less than that. I believe that indirect fire to pick up targets, indirect fire where you might just get 6s and do 2 mortals, is incredibly good at picking up targets. The slowing people was useful a little bit. But the big thing is that in the Eldar matchup, the night spinners mean you win in the Eldar Mirror. If they don't have night spinners and you do, the game's over, is basically what I saw throughout the tournament, and we'll talk about that. I have the 1 unit of Rangers to go with Illick. I have 2 Warwalkers. Warwalkers are silly durable. And if you're going to play against Genestealer Cult, which I put a lot of planning into, Warwalkers are obnoxious for Genestealer Cult to kill. They're seismic cannons, which are the thing that does the majority of shooting to light vehicles, wound Warwalkers on 6s. So Warwalkers really good durability for their points, but I actually found the 2 Bright Lances with a reroll to hit to reroll to wound was actually obnoxious for people to deal with. Sometimes the Warwalker would just be like, that tank died. It would just be a thing it would do. The pregame move means I started them out in the open, and then if I went second, I'd move them behind a wall and make it so they couldn't be seen on the first turn. And if I went first, they'd move out to wherever I wanted them to get angles and take objectives. I think the Warwalkers are actually mandatory, because I think without some sort of stompy robot out there in the field, Warwalkers or Wraith Lords, if you want, however, they're a lot more expensive. I found that their ability to go get on things gave me early game board dominion's not right. Early game. Thank you. That's exactly what the word I was looking for.
What happens if you don't have that is you don't put something on the center objective, and I can afford to also not put something on the center objective, and suddenly your shooting army has no targets.
Right.
You put that out there, I have to act.
Yep. Yeah. That's exactly right. We had that yesterday in our Tyranid game, right? I threw the T-Fex out on the middle objective on the first turn, and it's like, yeah, you might kill this, but the amount of things you're going to need in order to kill this is going to be a lot. And you did. You put a lot out there, and I was able to deal with it. Warp Spiders, mandatory. Put 1 unit in every Eldar list. 24-inch move is silly. 24-inch move and then shoot 66 strength 4 flamers is silly. They did amusing things like jump to an objective and kill a Farseer. They stole people's home objectives for 8 victory points several times in the tournament. Like they're just that good.
Yeah.
And then a Wraith Knight. I took the Wraith Knight because I felt like it was broken enough that I needed to play with it. We also told the story about the particular Wraith Knight I brought. I'm not going to tell that story for the 17th time. And then the Wraith Knight itself with guide on it means that if I play Genestealer Cult and I just roll a little bit hot, their game is really awful. Because when the Neophyte units and the bomb units come in with guide, I can just pick those units up with the Wraith Knight. I didn't play Genestealer Cult, so it didn't matter. And at the end, we'll talk about whether or not I think the Wraith Knight is actually worth its points. Okay. So my plan was that this army beats everyone that's not Genestealer Cult, and then I'll struggle really hard and work really hard into Genestealer Cult. That was my plan. I don't think Eldar have a lot of great answers for Genestealer Cult in their current build, so I gave myself a 30 or 40% chance into Tyler. What I had almost no prep into was Custodes, which we'll talk about. All right, so speaking of Custodes, Hank, what did you bring and why?
Okay, so spoiler for the finals. Trimble and I have pretty divergent list design philosophies when it comes to Custodes. Trimble is really, really big into the question style of list, which is, I brought a gigantic brick in a sock. Can you deal with it? If no, I win. And obviously it's going to end up being very successful for him. I have the opposite approach. I have what I call an answer list. My custodian list is obvious. Like it's still got 3 big chunking units of custodians, and it relies on their stats very, very heavily. But in general, its goal is to have as many flexible options as possible so that I have a win path no matter who I'm paired into. Now, it's not necessarily going to be a favorable matchup into anything, but I want to show up on the table and go, okay, cool. Is there a Wraith Knight and a bunch of Fire Prisms? I have a plan and something that I'm going to do. Is it going to be a whole bunch of ambush and G-Sealer cults with 3-inch deep strikes and demo charges being thrown at me? Cool, I have a plan for that. Am I playing against Imperial Knights? Cool, I have a plan for that. Am I playing against Oath of Moment Marines with a bunch of indirect? Cool, I have a plan for that. And so I went for maximum flexibility. The list ended up being fairly simple. It's a custodian list. It doesn't have a whole lot of stuff to it. The Warlord is going to be just a basic plain Jane, no enhancements, shield captain with a spear. He's going to be joined by a 9-man unit of custodian guards. Going to have in that unit 3 guys with sword and shield, 1 guy with a flag and a shield, and 5 guys with spears. Then I have a 6-man unit of wardens with a flag and a bunch of spears. They are joined by a character, the Blade Champion. Blade Champion gives them a free heroic interventions, reroll advances and charges, and once per game, the unit gets to advance and charge, which is pretty transformative for what that unit can do. Wardens themselves, they're just like, they have 2 different durability mechanics that don't drain my CP. Basically, as long as they have a character joined to them, they have the pseudo transhuman subtract 1 from all 2 wound rolls from attacks that are that are higher than their toughness. And then they have a once per game at the top of a phase. They can choose to just get a 4+2 no pain against all damage, and that just allows me to have 2 really durable units out there without having to dump 6 or 8 CP into it. Then this last little bit is I have a 5-man unit of Alaris Custodians joined by a Alaris Custodian champion. And this is some credit I have to give where credit is due. This is not my idea. This is through Colin. I was getting some list advice from the boy king, John Lennon. And he said, hey, Hank, have you looked at the math on what units of Alaris Custodians do in the Gene-Stealer cult matchup? And oh boy, he is 100% right, because Alaris Custodians are one of the few custodian units that actually shoot a whole bunch, because every one of them has a wrist-mounted D6 blast grenade launcher, and as well as their axe-mounted gun. And they also have a rule called the Slayers of Tyrants, which says that if they're targeting any enemy units that have either the monster, vehicle, or character keywords, they get full rerolls to wound. And little thing for anyone who hasn't been keeping up with that document where they clarify everything. If you have 1 character in a unit of bodyguards, the entire bodyguard unit has the character keyword, which means that everything that Alaris Custodian unit does gets to reroll wounds against anything joined by a character. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Gene-Stealer Cult, they like joining characters to giant 20-man units to get crazy buffs.
They take like 9. They take like 9 characters in a 2,000-point list. It's zany.
Yes, 100%. And when we get to my Gene-Stealer Cult game, I'll talk about it. But these guys kill so many Gene-Stealer Cult models every turn. It is silly. So, like I said, full credit where credit is due. Thank you for the heads up, John Lennon. That was that. I had so much fun with that Alaris Terminator brick that I am seriously considering dropping some things from my list to put a second Alaris Terminator brick in there. They are that good. So three custodian bricks, each one joined by a character, and then there is 2 of the Forge World Caladius tanks with the heavy blaze cannons. They're just really, really good against Knights and Wraith Knights and a lot of the big towering stuff out there. There's a lot of custodian players out there who are of the opinion that, especially on GW terrain, you don't need big guns in order to fight Knights and whatnot. It's been my experience that, especially against like the Valiant, the Flamer, and the Overwatch heavy Knight builds, they can just post up and go, I'm going to shoot you whenever and wherever you pop up, and you have no real way to pressure me outside of standing on objectives and serving up your units to my damage output effectively. I don't like playing like that. A pair of Caladiuses basically allows me to point at a knight and stand well out of their ability to retaliate against them and just say, that knight's on a clock. You have to do something about it, because if you just let me shoot it for 2 turns, it is dead. And in several of my matchups, they proved themselves roundly capable of simply one-rounding a knight. So that just it gives me play into bigger things. Then I have in the Imperial Agent slot, there was this is the one that even on stream, Nick Nanavati was like looking at my list and he was like, I don't know why he has these in his list. And lots of people were commenting about it. I have a plain Jane 55-point Inquisitor who has the Psyker upgrade and a Force weapon. The Inquisitor there is there for one reason and one reason only. If you join them to a unit of henchmen, there is one specific henchman called a Mystic, and the Mystic has the rule that says, as long as an Inquisitor is joined to this unit, the Mystic model has a 12-inch no deep strike aura, which is literally the only way that you can get that rule in Custodes, and that's just a very powerful piece of tech for the matchup into Genestealer Cult. So the whole idea is, one of the big things that Genestealer Cults can do is they have these acolyte units that are is it acolytes or hybrids? Whoever throws the demo chart.
Well, you have both words in their name. They're called acolyte hybrids.
Oh, well, cool. Then awesome. But yeah, their whole thing is they deep strike 3 inches away from you, and then they have 6-inch range demo charges that just ruin your day. They can stack buff after buff after buff, and they end up making 35, 40 attacks with demo charges that all have sustained hits 1, and it's all like AP -5 and strength.
It's
12,
basically whatever AP they want. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. They come in and they just delete a thing. Well, geometry says that if you can fit every model of a Custodian Guard unit within 6 inches of a Mystic, it is illegal to target it with bombs that show up from deep strike, because they can only throw them 6 inches. And as long as I can make sure that you have to be at least more than 6 inches away with a 12-inch no deep strike aura, I am allowed to put a Custodian Guard unit wherever I want, and it is immune to bombs. And that was a big piece of tech that I used in my Genestealer matchup. That is why they are there. And then the other random little thing I have in the list is this 5-man unit of Witch Seekers. They're the Sisters of Silence unit that has a 6-inch scout move, and they have flamers. I imagined this in my head as a little bit of extra redundant tech against Genestealer Cult, because they have 5 flamers. Genestealer Cult hate flamers, but mostly they have the ability to, after they've shot something, they can pick something that suffered any amount of hits from their weapons and force an out-of-sequence battle shock check on it. And the idea was, if they try and drop bombs on a different unit of mine, I pop Overwatch. I don't have enough math to actually kill all the bombs before they shoot. But if I can force them to fail an Overwatch check, I lock them out of any offensive strats being able to use on their drop turn. Was my thinking. Turns out Genestealer players with good placement are mostly able to just delay their drop and then drop a different unit and just shoot them and then come down on turn 3. So if I were to remake the list, I would probably cut that unit in half and get a unit of Bolter Babes. And I just want to come to preach to everyone the gospel of the Exaction Squad for Adeptus Arbites, because those things are 35 points of why is this 35 points and why doesn't every Imperial list start with 70 points of police? Because they are super cheap and they are amazing action monkeys, and everyone should get them until they're... I would pay double the points that they have for them, and I won't be surprised if GW jacks them up in the first balance match. So there you go. Okay. That's what I brought.
Don't forget, the basic Inquisitor is great, but Kyra Draxus.
Yes. Kyra Draxus is also probably going to be featured in changes I make to the upcoming list at some GTs I'm planning on going to.
The best. She's just the best.
Because you can join her to a 10-man unit of Custodian Guard, and she can just say, but what if you couldn't shoot me if you were further than 18 inches away on a 10-man unit of Custodian Guard? You want to talk about making Night Spinners sad.
All right.
There you go.
So Hank's List Corner basically is what just happened, and that's great. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take 20 minutes per game, and we're going to talk about, let's see, 21... No. That's not true. So we're going to tell the story of the tournament from each of us. My games in particular are not worth going in incredible depth into. So a lot of this will be storytelling, and then each of us is going to dive deep into games that we think are useful. We're aiming for 2 games at most from Chuck and I that we'll go into depth on, and Hank gets to do 3 if he wants, because he played a lot more games than us.
Sure.
So, and again, like what we're doing here is we're looking for things people can learn from or be entertained by, right? That's what we're specifically looking for.
Yeah.
So I'll go first. My tournament started off with me drawing Necrons. I had not played Necrons much with Eldar, and actually maybe not at all. So the first thing I did is I looked at his list. He didn't have the Necron Warrior thing. Oh, no, yes, he did have the Necron Warrior thing. So he's got Oricon, the Diviner, an Overlord, 2 Technomancers, the big unit of 20 Warriors, a Ghost Arc, that's to bring the Necron Warriors back better, 2 Reanimators, that's to make the Warriors come back better, 2x3 Scarabs, a Spider, 2 units of Crypto Thralls, which I just effing jerks. I just can't stand them. 3 Doomsday Arcs, a Locust Heavy Destroyer, just the one guy, just 45 points. Here's a Locust Heavy Destroyer. And then 10 Lich Guard and 3 Tomb Blades. By the way, I was really impressed with the Tomb Blades in this edition. I don't know if you guys have played Necrons much, but they're really surprisingly good for 80 points. They are much better than the 80-point value I'm getting with Wind Riders.
Sure.
So I looked at this list and said, the Doomsday Arcs can kill my Knight. And other than that, I'm not really worried about this, because if I have my Knight, I'll spam Mortals on the Lich Guard. And sure, they'll get a Feel No Pain, but eventually it'll burn through them. And then if I can ignore the Warrior Blob until I've killed its reanimation pieces, then I'll do that. So the game started with me strat reserving my Wraith Knight, which shocked people every time I did it. But the reality is, if he starts all 3 Doomsday Arcs on the table, and I start the Wraith Knight on the table and he goes first, I might just not have the Wraith Knight. And remember that the Wraith Knight in my list is almost 500 points, but it also has 150 points of additional support character in the case of Guide. So it's like a third of my list. And so I wanted to keep it off the board. He kept 2 Doomsday Arcs off the board and started 1 on. And the Fire Prisms were able to get good angles on things, but not on the Doomsday Arc. So I brought the Wraith Knight in. So he went before me. So he brought the Doomsday Arcs in. I brought the Wraith Knight in, killed killed a Doomsday Arc. The other 2 shot the Wraith Knight on his turn, did nothing to it. And then it shot back and killed them. So the Doomsday Arcs, the problem with the Doomsday Arcs is the same problem they had in 8th edition, where they're just a complete slot machine. D6 shots, D6 +1 damage. You might hit, you might wound. Like when he did get through the Wraith Knight, he rolled low on damage. What does he do about that? He's not playing Eldar. He can't just be like, it's a 6. So what happened there is I kept shooting him off, and with indirect fire, I killed all of his reanimators really early in the game, which he did not appreciate. And so the Lich Guard came up the table. By the way, on the first turn, I did go first. I had that wrong, because on the very first turn, I Night Spinnered his Lich Guard and said, there you go. They're going to move 3 and not advance. Mm-hmm. And he's like, well, that's rude. So the Lich Guard ended up in the middle of the table, and every turn I vomited mortals on them from the Wraith Knight, either in Overwatch or in actual shooting, and they just kept not dying, and it took me like 3 turns to kill them, and then they died. But the funny thing is that while that was happening, my army was so quickly removing all the rest of the Necrons, I ignored the Warrior Brick. It took an objective, and I just said, congrats, Warrior Brick, that's your objective. Mm-hmm. And I shot everything else off, and in the end, it was pretty lopsided, because he only had the Warrior unit at the end, and I had a lot more. I did only score 78 on this one, because Eldar, if they get weirdly put back on their back foot early, don't score points particularly well early on. I think the entirety of playing Eldar, if you're not just going to shoot your opponent off the table, is trying to score points early, because the late game, you're going to probably have more killing power left than your opponent. And so early, you need to make sure you don't fall so far in points that you can't catch up. So that was my first game. That was Alex Nadjek. Alex was great. Actually, all my opponents were great. And then second round. Why is this not going? There it goes. Second round, I played our buddy, Peter, who is a huge Death Corps guy. Loves them, has a gorgeous Imperial Guard army, just really, really pretty. He's put, all the detail that Guard players don't do, like every rivet painted and everything highlighted. Like he does all of that. His tanks are amazing. Oh man, I took so many photos at the tournament that I was going to show on this episode and then didn't prepare them and didn't remember them until just now, which is only slightly more progress than what I normally come up with, which is I'm going to take photos and then I don't. So I made slightly farther into the plan. Anyways, gorgeous army. He had a shadow sword and tanks, basically. This was not Peter attempting to take the best thing. This is Peter taking what he wanted to take. He has no indirect fire, which was what he was excited about. Death Corps Marshal, Lord Solar, Platoon Squad, Primaris Psyker, Tank Commander, Ursula, 1 unit of Cadians, 2 units of 1 unit of Death Corps, 1 unit of 20 Death Corps, 1 unit of 10 Death Corps. I was surprised at how durable those are. They have a feel no pain or something.
Yeah.
I was trying to indirect those off of objectives, and it was really obnoxious.
And they can bring back D3 guys.
Yeah, and they bring guys back. I was really surprised at how good those little units were. 65 points for 10 of those seems really great.
Fun, weird thing I discovered about the Death Corps unit. The ability to bring back D3 guys is in the war gear ability, but there's no way to equip any guy in the unit with the war gear.
Yep.
Weird.
Yep.
So that's strange. And then 2 Leman Rust Demolisher, a Rogel Dorn, 3 Scout Sentinels with las cannons, and a Shadow Sword. Interesting tech here. The Scout Sentinels, when they come back from the 2CP strat that Guard have, get their Hunter Killer Missile back. GSC Acolytes do not get their bombs back because it's the same unit coming back. But this is actually a different Sentinel coming onto the table. I thought that was really interesting. It made me wonder if he wanted a bigger unit of them. But what he was doing is suiciding his little one-man units out, letting them die, and then strat reserving them in at really good angles on the next turn. I thought that was really solid. I thought that was really good Guard tech.
Having played some Guard, I can say with some authority that one of the reasons why Guard players will probably opt to go for smaller Sentinel units rather than big Sentinel units is because big Sentinel units can actually be annoying to kill, and sometimes you want them to die specifically so you can bring them in at a different angle on the next turn.
Yeah, I think that 3 Armored Sentinels is a very different thing than 1 Scout Sentinel. I think it's very different tech. I think if you have 3 Armored Sentinels, they're kind of a central war point of your army. You're not out of flank with them. You're kind of like staring down the barrel with them and having them do as much damage as they can and moving forward.
Yeah.
So that someone has to push them back. One of the things with Guard I've noticed is they don't have a lot of ability to push forward. Their tanks kind of do. Their tanks do, but like against a lot of armies, if your tanks move forward, then they're going to die. Like you don't want to be closer with the tanks. So they could throw guardsmen forward, but they don't have anything that's so aggressively threatening that they can like push it forward and be like, there you go, now you have to deal with it.
Yeah, they gutted both Bulgrin and Rough Riders in the move to 10th, so it's
Mitch is really excited. Mitch is really excited to talk about what I'm saying. I can tell.
I think Guard players are completely ignoring the regular Torox because until now it's been something you should just ignore. Its ability to move 12 inches, advance, and then have your unit get out and make a normal move, shoot, or do an action is pretty incredible for move blocking and for projecting disposable force.
Why do people get to move after they get out of it?
That it's a special rule. It literally
it's not an assault ramp?
No, the only thing you're not allowed to do is charge. It says you're eligible to do everything else except charge.
Yeah, that's neat.
It's really cool tech that I'm working on right now. I think that's what Guard players are sleeping on to project. Because you can also with the Lord Solar give it a move. So so now it's moving 15 plus whatever you roll for your advance plus 6 inches for the guardsmen, and then if you're advancing them too. Like you have some tremendous ability turn 1 to just be like, hey, you're going to just hang out in your deployment zone. All these little guys with gas masks say so. Kill them.
Yeah. Okay. This particular game was all tanks, basically. And what we found is because of I strat reserved the Wraith Knight. And then the Wraith Knight came in and one-shotted the Shadow Sword.
He didn't reserve it?
He did not reserve it, and I did reserve mine. So
Who went first?
I can't remember, and it
Okay.
didn't. The reality is that the Shadow Sword is not Titanic, and so it cannot see. It is not towering.
There you go.
So
No.
the problem that we ran into is that in order for Peter to hide it from the fire prisms, it couldn't do anything other than shoot at the Wraith Knight. Like, that was the only job it was going to be able to have. And so the way the game ended up going is I was able to just hide from Peter and poke at him from far away until he had to bring his tanks out, and then they all died. The AP4 fire prism shooting that's 6 damage flat just laughs at Lehman Russ's.
It does.
And even the Rogel Dorn, like, he's like, okay, I'll ignore the first one. I'm like, okay, well, I've got, potentially 5 more hits coming in for 6 damage each. And his Shadow Sword did blow up and do damage to the tanks around it too. So it was just not a good game, frankly. Peter and I had a good time, but our game was done in 50 minutes. And then we wandered around the tournament and talked to people. So that was 92-69. The reality there is that guard doesn't have the mobility to get the angles. Unless you're silly enough to come within 24 inches of the Shadow Sword with your Fire Prism and get it overwatched, which was the one thing I was avoiding. Because the Shadow Sword just rolls randomly good and you just die is not great for the one Fire Prism you poke out. And then round 3 is when I decided to start playing only Eldar players. The first Eldar player I played was Keith Loveday. And Keith's Eldar list, so I looked at it and it said, and I said, okay, oh, I clicked the wrong button. Okay, so I clicked on it. I'm like, okay, Autarch, Wayleaper, Leaper. First of all, I always look to see, do they have a Wraith Knight? Okay, he's got a Wraith Knight. He has 10 Wraith Guard with D size. Those are the multiple shotguns. They're not as good, in my opinion, as the big guns, but I don't think they're completely wrong. 2 units of Warp Spiders, a unit of Rangers, the 3 Fire Prisms, and Guardians. And then the Spirit Seer, naturally, to go with the Wraith Guard. And I looked at this and I said, okay, we both have a Wraith Knight. He probably won't know to strat reserve his. So I'm going to strat reserve mine, because if you don't and your opponent goes first, the Fire Prisms pick it up. I don't know what the math is for the Fire Prisms to not pick up the Wraith Knight, but they're probably going to pick it up. And if you don't get to go first and put -1 to wound on it, it's just terrible. They're hitting on 3s with 2 rerolls. They're wounding on 3s with 2 rerolls. And then you're making if you're in cover, you're making a 5-up save or taking 5 damage.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really bad. And so if you strat reserve, you get to come in and you hopefully get to kill 1 Fire Prism before anything else happens. That's the goal. And then the other thing is he doesn't have Night Spinners, which we talked about the importance of earlier. So I went into my L, he went into his L. He put his Knight. I managed to put out garbage until he put his Wraith Knight down. He put his Wraith Knight down. I measured it to the corner of my table. This was table corners. I measured from his Wraith Knight to the corner of my table and saw that I had space for the Fire Prisms to be out and be over 1 inch from the Wraith Knight being able to move forward and shoot them. And that was the game. I'm sorry, 10th edition. You're not that interesting sometimes, and this is one of those times. Yeah. Because his Wraith Knight did not deploy in a way where it could get to me, he went first. The Wraith Knight shot nothing. I might have killed a Warwalker, I don't remember, but I did not do anything meaningful. The Fire Prisms had to hide because they didn't have angles. And then the Wraith Knight came, and then my turn went, and I Fire Prismed the Wraith Knight off the table. Then his Fire Prisms couldn't see my Fire Prisms, so the next turn, he exposed the Fire Prism to try to kill one of my Warwalkers and get a bunch of points. So my Wraith Knight comes in, my Fire Prisms come in, I move the Fire Prisms aggressively forward to get angles on multiple of his Fire Prisms while still seeing each other, so that if he phantasms back any of his, I get to kill the other one. Wraith Knight kills 1, Fire Prisms kill 1. He now has 1 Fire Prism and no Wraith Knight. I have 3 Fire Prisms and 1 Wraith Knight, while the Night Spinners are just picking him up. That's the game, and then it was over. We had a lovely time. I absolutely talked to him about misdeploying the Wraith Knight because he went first, which is the whole point. Yeah. If you go first and your opponent has a Knight and you have 3 Fire Prisms, you don't have to play against that Knight. So I ended day one 3-0, not having played any of the people that I was really afraid of. And let's go to Chuck's first day.
All right. Well, I too started with Necrons. Let's take a look at the list real quick.
Same guy.
In general, it's got one blob of warriors. It's got a monolith. It's got all the stuff that you put into a blob of warriors, right? It's got the same crypto text. It's got all that stuff. And then it's got a couple of locust destroyers and tomb blades and things like that. Basically, very similar to what Colin's talking about, but not quite as buttoned up. I talked to Mike, and this is going to be his very first game of 10th edition.
Oh.
And he came for the weekend to play some games and just learn it. And so he was very clear, but like if you see something, don't worry about it. Like, let me know. This game went very quickly. He put his warriors out on one flank, and he put his monolith on the other flank, thinking that, like, I'll be able to escape that flank if I need to. I started by pushing a unit of Squawkhog Riders to the center objective and hiding everything else behind all of those lovely buildings. He brought a bunch of stuff out to punish me for having my Squawkhog Riders in the open. I popped -1 to wound and did not feel punished. This is a common occurrence in my games. Here's some Squawkhog Riders. I dare you to shoot at it. Oh, you did nothing.
What are their toughness?
T7.
Oh, okay.
-1 to wound, 4 up, and a 5 up feel no pain. 3 wounds
that's
each. Like they don't go very far. And if I still have 3 of them when you're done, they're still functional to some degree.
Honestly, 3 wound units with a 5 up field of pain is so good because the math is so weird on killing them because you don't know. As Hank knows, the number of times we've shot at aberrants who have a 4 up field of pain.
Yeah.
Sometimes someone takes no damage, and sometimes they take 3 damage. And yes, all the other variances are there as well. So it's extremely hard to know how many hits somebody's actually going to need to take.
Yup.
So after I had pulled him out into engaging into space, I charged, I think, a truck and 2 units of bikes into the 20-man warrior squad. Because what's better than trying to kill that unit is to mire it down in the long combat that it can't actually get out of. And then I charged really hard on the other flank and took the monolith away. The Necron relic enhancement can't teleport out of combat. And with the monolith gone, he can't teleport them anymore. So as he sort of started blobbing around me, I then used my other truck to burn the objective on their side of the table, so that blob was now, I effectively killed it by throwing my trash into it and burning the objective on its side. And so I just started working my way the other way down the flank, picking everything up. That's basically the whole game. I think that one maneuver is the whole what the game was about, right?
Sure.
I ended up winning it. I think it was like 108 points before the being limited by category to 15. It was kind of a complete rout. That's about all on that one.
Is it helpful for me to talk through the list quickly for you for the other armies? Is that helpful? Okay. Yeah. So then you played our friend Forest Phantom. Did you remember had you played him before? Like I thought.
No, that's round 3. Round
no,
2,
it's not. Is it?
Round 2 is Bradford.
Oh, sorry.
Brad.
I was trying to be all helpful, and then I skipped forward around.
That's all right. The game with Forest is very interesting, but we'll get through this one real quick.
So Bradford brought something that is not Space Wolves.
That's correct.
Dark Angels. So Ancient Terminator Armor, Captain Terminator Armor, Raven Wing, Talon Master, 3x3 attack bike squads with multi-meltas. It looks like they're still underpointed from looking at this. Bike squad, Deathwing Command Squad with 10 Terminators with an absolute crazy mixture of things, including an Apothecary, and then tons of Thunderhammers and all types of things. Land Speeder, Ravenwing Dark Shroud, 2 Vengeance Land Speeders, and the Storm Speeder Thunderstrike, which is obnoxious because it shoots something and gives everybody plus wound against that thing, which is really dumb. All right, that's his list. How'd it go?
Right. So he pushed Terminators up the center to be a wall for his land speeders to ride around behind it and shoot at pigs, and that all went very well. I used my my large Gretchen unit to push over on the left flank and do what I call objective secure. That unit is big enough that you will not touch the objective. I just fill the whole thing with models, make a circle around it, and then still put like 10 guys inside it. And they sat there. He set a bunch of bikes over there to deal with that. That unit is very interesting. In shooting, it's toughness 2 for the Gretchen. In close combat, it's toughness 5. And the character gives it -1 to be wounded. So as soon as he got close to try to shoot at me, I just mobbed his units into combat with me, and then left some guys tailing back to hold the objective. That put him in a bad spot, because I had now basically put my army in the center and taken a thing. So I had created a triangle, and he's shooting at it, but it's not enough, fast enough. So he pushed in. The Terminators went into me, and he forced me to teach myself how many mortal wounds my army can do. I threw grenades with the grenade strats. I tank shocked with the tanks. I threw all of my Squig Hog bombs. I sent Mazrog in. I spent a CP on a reroll to try to get a devastating wound. I 100% into it. And what I learned is that's great. That will kill 5 of those 10 Terminators. That still leaves 5 of those Terminators right there.
Yeah.
The right answer I have learned is to ship Mazrog into that squad and give him -1 to be wounded every combat. They wounded 1/6s. They're done. We're great. We're both done. End of story. The 2 units will just be doing this. Great. From there, I killed, I would say, half of those speeders over the course of the game as they got too close, or I got a lucky charge or whatever. But mostly I kept them off of the objectives while he dwindled my army down to the point where we finally finished the game out. Score-wise, I got 100 and something, and it's not actually showing Brad's score.
You got 64. 100 to 64.
Okay. That was pretty good. Both those games felt very similar. I'll show you. You can just Squig Hogs. You'll try to act on it. I'll wah, and then I will act on you for getting too close to me.
Okay.
Pretty straightforward.
So you'd played Forrest before, right? Forrest Fenton, who's next?
Yeah. We at least we'd met each other before. We couldn't remember the game, but who knows?
Okay. Well, Forrest is a very proud Space Wolf player. I've played him before. He loves his Space Wolves. So Captain and Terminator armor, Iron Priest, Primaris Apothecary, unit of 10 Desolators, 3 Gladiator Lancers, which are just the best one. And then 10 Wolfguard Terminators, basically Thunderhammer Storm Shield and 2 Cyclone Missile Launchers. Then a Calidus Assassin and a Knight Crusader. There you go.
This has got the unholy combination that ruins my ability to function. He has very good towering shooting, and then he's also got the Desolators. He opened this game up by splitting the Desolators into like 5 different small squads and just blasting them either all the way to death or just down to like 1 guy. And then followed up with the Knight.
Talk about how he split the targets on that, Chuck, because I thought when you told me that yesterday it was interesting.
Yeah, it was basically 2 or 3 dudes per, like, those 5 Storm Boys will get these 3 guys. Those Grots will get these 2 guys. He really went for spot on math. And then where he wasn't, like, he would spike and kill something, or he'd get regular and he would kill something and he left something behind. That thing he left behind got a little bit of attention from the Knight, right? Like the missile launcher went into them to finish it, right? Like, so he could, the combination of the 2 meant that he got to hammer me at high efficiency and then go, okay, well, I can smooth out the math later. But also that Knight, the rapid fire battle cannon and the chain gun are amazing into the Squig Hogs. So I was losing, I lost a lot of things before I even started to participate in the game. By round 2 of the game, I was obviously had lost the game and was throwing things into like, what kind of points can I grab before I'm tabled? And that's the way the game went. It was a slaughter. And that's just those 2 units. Remember, there's some Gladiators running around. There's 10 Terminators.
Yeah.
I made it my personal mission to kill the 10 Terminators before I was removed from the table because, I don't know, I wanted something out of the game. But like, I don't believe there is a game in that I could win. If he put the Knight and the Desolators on the line and allowed me to charge them on the first turn, I think he still wins the game. Like, I don't.
Yeah, and unfortunately, well, there's lots that's fun about 10th edition. The tight rule set, the terrain, there's lots that's good. Unfortunately, both Chuck and I felt like we had many games that were decided by list design.
This is actually an emotional point for me. Like, like those first two games, I was like, oh yeah, I did the thing and then I won. That was great. And then I played this game and I was like, oh, I lost. And I started thinking about like what happened. It's like, well, there's nothing I could have done about it. And that got me thinking, reviewing back. I looked at the other two games and I was like, I don't think there's anything those opponents could have done anything about me.
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, I could have just mailed my list in for these 3 games, presumed some amount of mediocre play, and it would have been like, this is what the results would have been. And that was very
it's worse than that too, Chuck, because the Space Marine list that's causing you so much problem is not the S tier.
No,
I think that's what's so backbreaking about the meta, is that there's these things that just hard counter large portions of the game that if you asked me to tell you what the best factions in the game are, they wouldn't be in that list. I think knights are in the next tier. I don't even think that, and then I think Space Marines, especially based on their win rate, are another tier even below that. So the fact that Space Marines are like, nobody who puts infantry on the board gets to play against me is like, come on.
Yeah, like, so that Knight Crusader you were talking about, I have all of the bad things in the world to say about Knight Crusaders. I think that they to me, they have very bad matchups into most of the things that are fairly high tier, except there's a couple of matchups. Like, if you have an army that does not rely on quality armor saves, like Genestealer Cult or Orcs, or to a lesser extent Necrons, Crusaders are actually amazing. Where Crusaders fall flat for me is other knights, Eldar where they're shooting a Wraith Knight, Custodes, anything where they have to shoot at a 3+ save or better, or tough or higher than toughness 10. Crusaders are just like straight garbage.
Hence why he's got 3 Lancers.
Yeah.
Sure, that's fair. That's fair. But still, it's nearly 500 points of your army that is just like, I can't meaningfully engage other knights. It just feels really bad to me. However, there are these matchups where I bought a Crusader. Cool. I guess my opponent just doesn't get to play because they brought a bunch of infantry.
Well, I think it's like
to remove all of it.
What Colin's saying about the Lancers is really important to that, right? Like, he has a bunch of tools. He said the variance in toughness is higher in the game. The variance in saves and AP is higher. Let me bring such a wide variety that I'm likely to have the tool for the job. And then I'll play a game to try to do that. For me, the bad thing is that the two tools that he has that ignore cover or ignore terrain were the 2 tools that were perfect against me.
Sure.
So it's just like, whoop, goodbye.
Yep.
Mitch, we talked about a Space Wolf list, which means you have to have a moment to talk about it.
It had one Space Wolf model in it, so it's definitely a Space Wolf list.
I think that they used I'm sure he used the actual, Gladius Task Force.
It's Gladius, yeah.
So he didn't actually use the absolutely trash Space Wolf faction rules.
No, he would like to start with rules.
Yeah.
By the way, Mitch, let me say one thing before you share your comments. I was near 2 Space Wolf games where people explained the Warlord trait to people. I just wanted to.
Yeah.
Not the Warlord trait, but the Saga thing. I overheard 2 different conversations where that was explained.
There are a
to
lot of
opponent.
Space Wolf players in the Pacific Northwest, so that does not surprise me. And it's anyway. No, I'm not playing Marines right now because I feel like there are really good lists from Marines, and specifically Space Wolves. I think what he's doing is different than what I would do, but it's very interesting. But the indirect problem for me, and maybe it's more addressed, but I feel like I'm going to end up playing 20 Desolators and a couple Tech Marines and a Whirlwind or 2, and then a bunch of stuff that stops you from getting to that. And yay, I'm just gonna and if I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna play guard. I'm gonna play
the way Forrest described his army is and if you look at it, squint your eyes real tight so that everything's blurry, and look at Colin's army and look at his army. They're very similar. He has the budget version of Colin's army, and it allows him to be in the Space Wolf category, which is where he wants to be.
And 10 Terminators is a thing that I don't get to have.
Right. Yeah. That's his advantage in that.
Okay.
And there's a lot you can do with those Terminators. Did he have a character attached to them or anything?
He had a captain for the free strats, so he could go. My favorite combination against orcs who have a lot of AP 1 damage to close combat is, how about I ignore 1 of your AP and I give you -1 damage?
Yeah.
The pillowiest of fists.
Fair enough. Okay.
All right, so that was the end of Chuck's first day. I am all ready to help Hank with his opponents for his first day.
Sounds
It looks like you started with Eldar, which I'm sure, without knowing who your opponent was, you probably thought, great, Eldar first round.
Well, mostly I looked at his list and I was like, okay, fine, it's Eldar. I knew it was coming, but then I looked and was like, oh, no Wraith Knight and no Fire Prisms. Okay, this guy will probably at least have a more creative approach to the game. And it turns out his list.
Let me walk through his list really quick. Autark, auto-include Autark, Avatar, which I saw a lot of at the tournament, Farseer on foot. Sorry, that's a Farseer on bike, Spirit Seer to go with his 10 Wraithguard. His Wraithguard had the Wraith Cannons.
Yep.
He had 2 Night Spinners, 1 D-Cannon, which is a weird number of D-Cannons. That D-Cannon is so lonely. 2 Void Weavers, which, by the way, are bonkers crazy good for 100 points, and I'm going to start taking them.
Yep.
2 Vipers to basically take away cover and have a cheap fast thing that shoots a Bright Lance. Actually, sorry, 3 Vipers, excuse me.
Yep.
And then 3 Warwalkers, and then the 10 Wraithguard.
Yep. Okay, so this game, we were on Dawn of War deployment, which helped me a lot because it meant he had to kind of shove his stuff to the sides and he didn't have a big presence in the center. I was very well served here by the relative inexperience of my opponent. Mostly, he is not a brand spanking new player, but he also is not what I would call like a super dyed-in-the-wool veteran. And so because of that, there were a couple of mistakes that he made over the course of the game that I was able to capitalize on. Basically, I just move my stuff at him, holding cover as well as I can. And the game basically comes down to the fact that I move my Custodian Guard brick that's been fly-papered into place by Night Spinner barrages up to where I have like a 7-inch charge on his unit of Wraithguard. And at the end of my movement phase, he sits there and he takes like 3 minutes to think real hard about whether or not he wants to phantasm away. And he ends up not phantasming away and giving me the charge, specifically because that turn I had drawn Tempting Target as my secondary objective, and he had nominated the middle point that the Wraithguard were on. And my 4-inch move had allowed me to tow like a guy onto the objective. And if he phantasms out of charge range, he just backs off and gives me a free 5 points. And he didn't like the idea of giving me a free 5 points that I didn't have to work for. He was not overly familiar with what the output of a full 10-man squad of Custodian Guard charging onto an objective they now control is.
Sorry, Wraithguard.
Yeah. So I charged in. No, I did not wipe the unit. However, I knocked it down to like 2 guys left, which they did their shoot thing, but it just wasn't enough damage. So stuff happened on the flanks. The Avatar rolled over, tried to take another one of the objectives, and got rapid ingress Terminators to the face in reply. And it turns out the Avatar is both a monster and a character, so they got full rerolls to wound against it. And so, yeah, well, like this, the 6-man Terminators come out of Deep Strike. They walk up, they hose it down, and they do like 3 or 4 wounds with just the shooting. Then they charge into close combat. Yeah, sure, you're having all my damage, but I'm going to be Slayers of Nightmares for +1 to wound with full rerolls and lethal hits on my karate, and just kind of turn him into a smear on the landscape with that. And then on the other flank, I had just my unit of Wardens that was moving up the table. There was one turn when he decided to refocus the fire from the Night Spinners onto my Inquisitor unit on my back objective to try and deny me some primary. But on the turn that he did that, he was just like, oh, those Wardens that have been slowly walking up the table the entire game, they can advance and charge now. And now that they can advance, they got a big jump. Like I said, it was mostly it was a game that I was going to slowly win because he didn't have the ability to stay on the objectives, and I did. But I ended up winning it more quickly than I would have because he gave me mistakes that I could capitalize on. And I caught him, and his things died, and mine didn't, and that was pretty much the game.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next up, you played Knights, which I bet will be a long and interesting conversation.
Super long and interesting conversation.
Yeah, so he had a Castellan, he had a Warden, he had a Crusader Warlord with Banner of the Macarius Triumphant.
That's
and
the one
then
that gives him sticky objectives.
Okay, and then 3 Warglaives. No, sorry, 2 Warglaives and a Helverin.
Yep. Okay, so pretty much all you need to know about this game is I went first. I had both my Calladii on the table. The first Calladii shoots the Castellan and rolls 3 6s to hit and a 2. The Calladii have lethal hits against vehicles and monsters. So I auto wound 3 of the first shots. The guns are also all twin linked. So I successfully wounded with the reroll on the 4th shot. He fails all 4 4+ vulnerable saves, and I put 18 damage onto the knight with the first tank, and then the second tank shoots it and kills it. So I just go first and kill the only model in his army that is any threat to the Calladii, and that's pretty much the game. The game lasts maybe an hour because, like, turn 1, I kill the biggest knight. Turn 2, I kill both of the other knights, and then turn 3, I explain to him that I am now going to ignore everything that your other knights do, and I am only going to kill them if I have secondaries that pop up that will give me points for killing them. And then I get just a big old amount of points off of that. And that is pretty much that game. I just diced the absolute crap out of him on the top of 1.
Welcome to Knights.
Yep.
Third game, you played Robert Jones of Goonhammer, right? That's
yes,
who Robert
yes.
Jones is.
If anyone is curious about the actual course of this game is on stream, so you can just go watch it on Twitch.
Yeah. He has Thousand Sons, probably the army I have the most experience playing against in 10th edition. Ahriman, Exalted Sorcerer, Ahriman not on disc, dude on foot.
Yep.
Exalted Sorcerer, Infernal Master, Magnus, that's weird. Why would you take Magnus in a Thousand Sons?
I know, it's crazy.
Thousand Sons Sorcerer and Terminator Armor, and before, like, it's funny because you see that guy and you're like, great, there's rubrics later. There's Scarab Terminators later in the list.
Yep.
3 units of 10 rubrics and a unit of 5 rubrics, and then 10 Terminators and a Rhino.
Yep.
Some of those rubrics probably had flamers, and I missed it.
1 or 2 of the units had flamers. I know one unit had at least one unit had
flamers. 9. One's 10 flamers and one's 5 flamers. Go ahead.
There you go. Okay, so for those of you who watch the game on stream, you'll know that this is another game where I got to go first, and this one is mostly just my opponent was not as careful as he could have been with Magnus's placement on top of 1. And despite the fact that Magnus totally benefits from obscuring terrain right now, he is in fact posed in a very glorious wingspan stance.
Are you suggesting Magnus did something wrong?
I am suggesting that Magnus might have been at fault for something. Yes, in his pose.
He is far too glorious.
Far too glorious.
To abide by your obscuring rules.
It's almost as though he decided that what if I could emulate a peacock and spread my feathers as wide as I possibly can. And because I was able to see a foot with one Calladii and then the tips of his wings with a far flank Calladii, both tanks got to shoot him top of 1. I shot him. My opponent, unfortunately, had very bad luck on his dice. I wounded him 8 times. He failed 6 of those saves, and he had the stuff to 0 damage and to blank another damage, and still took like 18 damage from the Calladii. And then to add insult to injury, Magnus explodes in the middle of his army on the top of the first turn and ends up killing I think he ends up getting me an extra 4 or 5 Rubiks and a Terminator or 2.
I didn't know he exploded.
He exploded. Yes, there was a whole thing where
no, I didn't know that that's a feature.
Oh, yeah. He explodes for
what kind of damage does he do?
D6 mortals.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
he explodes. But everyone within 6 and his base is huge.
Ooh. Yes.
Everybody's hidden behind that L.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I just didn't have the context. I haven't played against Thousand Sons yet.
Oh, yeah. Well, so that happened, and despite that happening, this actually is still a game after that happens. Because the problem was I didn't know that I was going to kill Magnus on top of one. I was like, okay, I can put my Calladii in fairly safe spots and get shots on Magnus. That might work out, that might not work out, because I know like sometimes you roll 4s and sometimes you don't. So I angle to get the shots on Magnus, and then I move my army up in a very conservative fashion, because I know that if Thousand Suns want to turn the gas on, they can just rip through everything. So I'm like, okay, we're gonna go for the Magnus play, but we're also not going to assume that it's going to work. However, it does work, and because of that, I'm like, oh, well, because I went a little bit conservatively, that's going to give him an opening for him to put the gas on, and he does it, which is the right call, because it actually delays me getting onto the objectives and gives him the ability to go up in points. The game after that basically comes down to, I decide, okay, cool, I have to go out. I have to go into the center. I have to start getting points on the table. So I just throw my big 10-man brick up. Go ahead, do whatever you want to it, because then the center is mine. And he decides, all right, we're going. And he goes in and he kills like 6 or 7 of the guys with shooting, but it's not quite enough to finish the unit off. And he's like, okay, I have to hit a 9-inch charge to have these guys make it, to have my Terminator unit make it into the Guardian squad, hoping that the melee output of the Terminators will be enough to finish the unit off. Well, so it turns out I, in fact, know karate, and I have access to -1 damage. Also, I didn't know this, apparently, so I'm under the impression that last edition, the melee Kopeshes of the Terminators used to be strength 6. They're now strength 5, or strength 5.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, they're strength 5, and I'm toughness 6 on everything. Yeah. So they charge in. I have my shield captain pop the turbo karate turn, which gives me sustained hits, lethal hits, and -1 to be hit. I also pop -1 to all incoming damage, so I have the damage on all their Kopeshes. They come in, they make a bunch of attack, they do 7 wounds, and I have one of those pivotal moments where I decide, but what if this turn I just make 7 out of 8 4+ hit saves?
That's usually the best policy.
Yeah, definitely.
Custodies, man.
Yeah, definitely. You know,
really, it's the 4-up that we're mad at, and not that he decided to have 3 ridiculously powerful buffs at the same time. That's the thing that we're not pausing on that.
Yeah,
I didn't say what. It's all of it.
No, like I actually went back and watched the stream, and one of my favorite parts is when I make that roll. There's like 5 different people in the chat that just start shouting toilet dice, toilet dice, toilet dice.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I was just like, okay, I mean, fair enough. But that happens, and then on my clapback, I was just like, okay, I only have like 4 guys in this unit. That's still a bucket load of attacks. They kill
20 attacks.
Yeah, they kill 5 Terminators. Just go, because I also have a strat that says if the unit is below half, every model in the unit gets +2 attacks.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like 28 attacks back, and yeah, like on the clapback. So he charges me. He puts 1 wound on 1 custodian, and then I kill 5 Terminators on his turn. And from there, the game is pretty much over. I have like some rapid ingress Terminators that come down in his backfield and kill his stuff and everything. And the score of the game shows a closer game than what actually happened. But in general, I have a lot of respect for him. It was clear he had a decent amount of very justifiable salt that he worked very, very hard to keep under control, especially because he was on stream. There was one point where he heard that the tanks know karate, and there was a moment where the game pauses, and I have to show him that no, in fact, the Caladiuses actually do have the martial katas keyword, so the tanks actually can do karate to be -1 to be hit, because they did that in response to a Herman charging in, trying to get a couple of extra points, and then one of the tanks didn't take hit damage because a Herman was -1 to be hit, and he had a little bit of a moment where he needed to shout it out a little bit, and you can actually hear that bit on stream, which is funny. But
hey, we all need to scream into a pillow sometimes.
Definitely, no ill will. Overall,
playing Custodes is one.
So I spent some extra time on that game, and one of the reasons why I was patiently listening is we've talked a lot on This Week in 40K, Billy and I, that the only army in the game that gets to do close combat is Custodes.
Yep.
And that's literally what Hank is talking about. And it's wildly not okay. When we talk about the imbalance of 10th, regardless of whether or not Custodes have a high win percentage, the fact that they say no one else gets to close combat. Hank is telling stories of ridiculously powerful close combat units going into him and being like, oh, I'm fighting second, and they're -1 damage, and they're -1 to hit, and they're like all this crap added to also the Custodes are just going to fight first, and they have 5 attacks each.
So the thing, I am actually going to push back on that, because having played a decent amount of games with Custodes now, I don't actually think Custodes invalidate assault armies. What I think it feels like that, because a very popular way to build lists in 10th edition is to have a list that is very, very shooting heavy, and then have one high value assault asset that is your, in case I need to assault, I have this thing that does all of the assaulting that I think I'll need. And Custodes punish the absolute crap out of that one assault asset that you have. But when we get to day 2 games, I fight against an all assault army. I do beat it, but not by nearly as much as I thought I was going to. And he did loads of damage to me in the close combat phase. So I do think that all assault armies have play into Custodes. You just have to know how the Custodes strats work and how to overwhelm their ability to use them.
So you have to play an army with a lot of close combat, which of course is terrible in 10th edition. So noted.
Yeah.
No, I understand what you're saying.
So I have a question on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So going with like CP generation is where I'm going with, where I'm looking at it from. Like you have all these amazing strats and all this stuff. What is the CP economy of Custodes? I want to understand a little better.
Okay, so the CP economy of Custodes is all the shield captains have a once per battle round. One shield captain in your army can point at a strat and say, that strat is free for my unit, and I can use it an additional time, even if someone else has used it already.
Okay, so like Grey Knights have the exact same. Yeah.
The only difference is Grey Knights have it. It's once per game for some reason.
Oh yeah, it's once per game. Yeah, it's worse. It's way worse.
For Custodes, it's once per battle round.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. So your economy. That's why all of this is so problematic. Is you're able to do this with multiple. As someone who hasn't gotten to play against or with Custodes yet, like I want to make sure that for like the other people who haven't.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that you're doing all of these crazy things on multiple units at a time. So there is no weakness. It's just a wall.
One of the things that I will note that everyone should be aware of if you fight against Custodes. Custodes can only fight first with units that are standing on objectives.
Where else is the unit of 10 Custodes going to be?
I'm just letting you know.
They have to get there.
Like
you get them in transit.
Exactly. There will be some times if they miss a critical advance roll and they end up 1 inch short, or if they have to expose themselves to an objective that they don't want to get shot on. Like, it is not a thing. Don't take it for granted that literally every unit can always fight first, no matter where it's standing. Yes, in central objective missions, if there is a big unit on an objective, that is a thing that you have to worry about. But if you can catch them in transit, if they deep strike down onto not an objective and they miss a charge, there are points where they are vulnerable to normal stuff, and you just have to kind of wait for your moment and go in on that point.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's sorry, I just wanted a little more detail there.
Yeah.
So my favorite game of the weekend is my first game of day 2. I played a guy named Jorge Alcantara, or George. He doesn't care which one.
Yeah.
And George is incredible. A wonderful human, really, really fun to play, extremely talented, and sandbagged me really effectively.
Oh, yeah.
We had a conversation at the beginning of the game about the fact that his Elder list was more fun than mine. I agree. We'll talk about it just in a second. And then he has literally very little answer to the Raise Knight. This conversation was building me up and making me think this was going to be a lopsided game. And it wasn't at all, because George is great. So let's talk about George's list. His list was the Death Jester with Fate's Messenger. He had Eldrad, which he ended up using very effectively. And then a Farseer and the Incarn. 3 units of 5 Shadow Specters. I don't own Shadow Specters, so I'm not playing with them, but they're incredible. They're really, really good in the current meta. Their ability to jump back after shooting, they have a lot of shots, so they can kind of hose down trash. They have big shots if you're playing against harder targets. Like, they're just really good for their points. And then he had 2x2 units of Skyweavers with Haywire and Bolas. And then he had 3 individual D cannons. I guess you can only have them that way anymore. 2 Vipers with Bright Lances, 3 Warwalkers, and 3 units of Warp Spiders. So no Wraith Guard, no Fire Prisms, no Night Spinner, no Wraith Knight. Like, simply not the stuff that everybody else is taking. And the problem here is that without the Fire Prisms and only the 3D cannons, which I'm totally intending to Night Spinner, he doesn't have a great answers into the Wraith Knight. And remember that the D cannons shoot 24. So if he hides them, I'm just not going to move within 24 of the D cannons until they're gone.
Yeah.
So to me, this is an incredibly lopsided matchup, but I do decide that the Wraith Knight can start on the table. This is the first time he's done that. By the way, if you're strat reserving the Wraith Knight every game, having -1 to wound and -1 and reroll hits doesn't really matter. So what happened here is the Wraith Knight stayed back and tried to be safe, and we tried to shoot and pick up things. And so early on, I really aggressively punished him, and I pushed out, and I took most of the board, and I killed all of his Warp Spiders. I killed all of his what are they called? I just talked about them, the Forge Roll guys.
Shadow Specters?
Thank you, Shadow Specters. I killed all the Shadow Specters. I picked up so much, all of his Warwalkers. I'm just picking, except one, I think. I'm just picking everything up. And because of my cockiness, I extend too aggressively. And because I extend aggressively, his next turn, he brings everything in. And the D cannons were actually, he strat reserved both of the Haywire bikes, all 3 D cannons, 1 unit of Warp Spiders. He strat reserved and deep struck a lot. And what happened is, because I was a little bit spread out trying to push him aggressively, he was able to come in at really crazy angles. The D cannons all came in at incredibly painful places and just started picking up tanks. The Haywire guys came down and picked up tanks because they're doing Haywire. He did some chip damage on the Wraith Knight, not really enough to matter. And so he killed, we figured, like 800 or 900 points of my Eldar on turn 2 when he came in. And I thought, oh crap, I've been baited, and now I'm in a lot of trouble, and I had to play my absolute ass off to get back. The core thing was that I focused on just points and not caring if he's killing me. And because of my 2 Night Spinners that never died, the Night Spinners were able to pick up things off objectives, and that was huge. Then the Wraith Knight moved to the middle of the table and held the middle objective with its OC10. And he had a turn where he got to charge the Incarn into it, and I just rolled better than he did, and it didn't die. And we both agreed that was it, that was over. But the reality is that he worked so hard at killing me and getting points that he kept it close a long time. In the end, my ability to just stop him from getting primary is what made the difference. So fantastic game. I won 80-52 just because of primary. He actually outscored me on secondary.
I always warn everybody about Torres. I'm like, don't sleep on this guy. This guy, he looks small. He talks softly. That guy will mess you up.
Yeah, he was really good.
Yeah.
I really, really was impressed with him. And I really liked him as an opponent. If I had that game to do over again, I beat him much more soundly. Because his original statement of sandbagging, of saying your list is just really up, is like the worst matchup for me. He wasn't lying.
Yeah.
Like, the sandbagging was completely honest and sincere. It's just that he had more game than he let on.
Yes.
But Night Spinners were a massive problem for him, is basically what the reality is. Okay. Yeah. So that's my second Eldar in a row, and by far my most fun. Then the pairing problems for me start happening. And this is part of my frustration at the event, because I get paired into somebody. I'm undefeated. I'm in the top bracket. I'm 4-0. And now I want to play somebody, amazing, super undefeated. And instead I play someone with 1 loss. And I don't think that was fair to them or to me, because they were playing literally an Eldar mirror and had lost a game and I had not. and that seemed really unfair. This fits into my story, so guys, what I'm saying will matter here in a minute. He's got Flying Autark, Avatar, Farseer, Illic, Incarn. If you're taking Avatar and the Incarn, you better really know what you're doing, because that's just way too much beef that's killable. 3 Fire Spinners, 2 Night Spinners this time. 5 Rangers, 10 Rangers, Conclave, Warp Spider. So again, no Wraith Knight. And because he's got Fire Prisms, I strat reserved the Wraith Knight, but because he doesn't have a Wraith Knight of his own, that means that when my Wraith Knight comes in, it gets to kill a Fire Prism. And it did that, but he also exposed the Fire Prism that he wasn't able to Phantasm out of the way I got angles on it. So the reality is that I took Fire Prism shots to the face on my Wraith Knight, but I just shot him and he died. Like, that's literally the game. He didn't have a Wraith Knight and I did. So this game ended up being 100-22. Jake was a wonderful and amazing opponent. I think that Jake didn't have anywhere near the Eldar experience that he needed to deal with that matchup, with me having a Wraith Knight and him not having one. So that was so I've now played 3 Eldar games in a row, and I say to Chuck, I'm bored, because I was super bored. And this is when I get the phone call that I have an extremely sick dog at home. So that factors in here in a second. So now I go into my 6th round, and they pair me into an Eldar player whose name I don't remember because I'm not actually paired into him in the system. So they put me in my 4th consecutive Eldar mirror against a Irish guy. I can't remember his name right now. Really funny guy. Like, I'm frustrated from my 3 Eldar mirrors. I'm bored. My games have been taking like an hour and a half. My army is literally point and click shooting. Like, there's no close combat. There's jank. The Phantasm's wildly broken. And I use Phantasm in soul-crushing ways throughout the tournament on my opponents. But the reality is I'm still just point and click shooting people. There's no close combat. They don't have any close combat. If they do have close combat, it's the same as shooting and killing my thing. Because I'm playing Eldar, they charge me my thing dies. Like there's nothing interesting. So he deploys really well. I strat reserve my Wraith Knight. He doesn't strat reserve his Wraith Knight. I think, oh crap, he goes first. His Wraith Knight whiffs at killing the Fire Prisms. I go next. My Wraith Knight kills his Fire Prisms. And then I'm like, oh man, I'm going to win this game. And then Mike Brandt shows up and says, hey, are you undefeated, Colin? And I said, yes, I am. And he says, are you undefeated, Colin's opponent whose name he can't remember? I think it's Ian. I don't remember. And he said, no, I have a loss. And Brandt said, we messed up. This isn't the pairing you should have. We're an hour into the round. And I feel like I'm positioned to win after really being on my back feet early on.
Yeah.
So they grab me and they take me over to they like literally switch us and have us play other people. To their credit, since we're all undefeated, they said, hey, if you're going to play in the ghost round, we're going to feed you.
Yeah.
And even if you lost, we're going to feed you because your game started late and this is going to go late. So like, I appreciated what they did, but they took me and dropped me at Steve Trimble. Yeah. And Steve is probably the other, like, there's probably 3 or 4 people in Washington State that are the best players. Steve is certainly one of them. I've played Steve a lot. I like playing Steve. Like, I don't have any problem with that, but he's playing the 30 Warden army, and I have no preparation for that or no understanding of that. And it's the diagonal table, and I deploy in that same L that I've deployed in the whole game and lost it right there. If I spread out my army and everybody moves at full movement in different directions on the board, we have an incredibly interesting game. If I try to castle up and slow Steve on his way to me, it does not work. Unfortunately, I got gotcha really hard twice early in the game, one of which is that I didn't realize all the custode shooting is assault. It shouldn't be. That's dumb, but it is. And so all the measuring I did wasn't effective, and I lost stuff on the first turn I shouldn't have lost. To Steve's credit, he offered me to change my movement based on that knowledge. I didn't. Steve went first and rolled 5s and 6s on advances. Like, it didn't matter that I lost a few things to the advancing shooting. And then the thing that really nailed me is I calculated my entire turn to slow 2 of his custode, to basically shoot the middle custodes brick and slow down the other 2. And I measured everything to make brutal charges, only to find out when I night spinnered the Trajan unit that it doesn't get slowed down. I didn't know that. Because it doesn't get slowed down, it managed to charge a Warwalker and a Fire Prism and my Autark. And it's like, well, I thought you were going to be an 11-inch charge on all of those, and instead you're a 9. So actually, no, I think can't advance. He didn't advance the charge. So.
Yeah, he can't advance.
Anyways, basically, I shot him and didn't kill him fast enough, and then he killed me. There was no game here. I needed to spread out. I tried really hard. The Wraith Knight got comically hot on 2 rounds of shooting, doing over almost 30 mortals in both rounds of shooting, and killed 4 or 5 custodes, but it didn't matter because it just wasn't enough. And then he got to close combat with me, and it was over. The one unit that can fall back, advance, and charge, or not advance and charge, but can fall back, charge, and shoot, that unit was so bad for me because it went into the Wraith Knight.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, here we are. Next turn, I'm going to back up from the Wraith Knight and charge someone else. I played this game awful. I was tired and was not at all prepared. And honestly, playing the Eldar game for an hour before that was, while it is not, unreasonable that they changed our pairing, it was pretty rough. It was pretty rough to be sitting at a table against an Eldar player and think, oh, crap, I'm losing. Wait, I can win this. Never mind, I have to play Custodes down. That was pretty brutal. I lost my game to Steve, and I did a mental health check-in and looked at myself and talked to my wife about what was going on with our dog and realized that I was bored, not because of anything, not because of my opponents, but because of the ridiculous series of events that happened. And so I went home. And I regret going home because I felt super FOMO the next day. And I got 20th with not playing my last 2 games. So if I had played them, maybe I get 6th or 7th or 5th or something out of 360 people. That would have felt amazing. But the reality is I had no interest in playing more games with my army, and I was freaked out about my dog, and I was feeling really drained and tired. So I went home. So for those that listen to the show and you wish I had stayed the whole time, I wish I had stayed the whole time too. But I made a decision based on the data that I have. And as you can see behind me, my dog is fine. All right, Chuck, your day 2. Go ahead, Mitch.
Quick question there. So was Steve playing a different opponent too?
Yes, he was.
So how that worked was 6 different games got paired down.
Yeah.
What happened was I also got paired down. And in round 5, a good friend of TNG, Tyler Bortel, he is the GSC boogeyman that Colin and I both put loads and loads and loads of effort and brain space into trying to tech so that we could have at least a halfway fighting chance. He was my slated guy. Oh, 1 second.
Okay.
Is that all of
what?
Sorry, I'm 1 second. Something playing on my computer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we hear nothing.
Got it. Sorry. Got it.
No
okay,
worries.
Cool. All right. Anyways, Tyler Bortel, the guy that Colin and I both prepped for, plays an amazingly close game against Noah Badome and loses.
That we're all watching. That 9 people are watching because everyone else's games are done.
Well, because Noah was rolling amazing dice, crazy plays were happening, Ghost Knights were showing up in deployment zones and making turn 1 charges onto objectives in the home field. It was a wild game.
Yeah.
And everyone's just like,
he did nail the 6 into the 6 to do 12 mortal Overwatch.
Yeah. It was absurdly crazy game, super hype, and he managed to do it. He managed to Goliath slay and knock Tyler down into the losers bracket, and I was just like, I want to kneel down and I want to kiss Noah's hand. He has saved me from having to play Tyler, and freaking pairings go up and I am paired into Tyler, and I am just like, my brain goes, oh, there's probably at least 1 pair down, and I just go around and I'm just like, there is no justice, God is dead, and I'm going over there.
You just realized that you're a teacher.
Yes, it's fair. That's fair. But I was riding a high. I'm going in. I'm 5-0.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. But and then my good friend Jaden is walking by the table, and he's just like, "Hey, Hank, are you undefeated? How'd it go?" And I was just like, "There is no justice. God is dead. I got the pair down in the GSC." And he just kind of cocks his head sideways. He was like, "That sucks, man. Later. Good luck." And he goes off, and then what happened was he got to his table. He's also undefeated, and he hears that he also got a pair down. And so he's just like, wait a minute. Hank told me that he just got a pair down and we're both undefeated. There shouldn't be 2 pair downs if there's 2 undefeated playing X and ones. And then he immediately goes, like, big credit to Jaden. Jaden immediately goes over, finds a judge, and tells them that there are 2 pair downs in the top bracket, and that shouldn't be happening. Judge comes over and goes, oh, crap. You guys totally, yeah, you're right. Something's wrong. You 2 got mispaired. And so it's like, okay, cool. They just go and they take me and Jaden and they shove us together and give us a new table like 5 minutes into the round.
Oh, that sounds great. 5 minutes of the round would have been really great.
Yeah. Like 5 minutes into the round, we get immediately repaired. And then apparently that judge was just like, okay, cool. I'm glad that we caught that one little snafu. And then, like, as the round's going on, that judge gets curious and starts investigating. And he goes, oh, there's like 4 other pair down games I have to go fix right now.
What I'm hearing here is a certain Jolly Rogered digital tournament format company app shit the bed again.
Yeah.
Why do we all use BCP? Why is BCP the standard that every tournament uses?
So this is a great
literally
example.
Nobody can make a better one that doesn't crap out all the time. Like, that's not possible.
This is a great example of how monopolies work in capitalism.
Yep.
There is no incentive to improve the product because there is no competition.
Yeah.
I think it's bold to assume it was the product, but sure.
Okay, we've gone a really long time here. Let's go through Chuck's game.
Sure. Oh yeah,
day 2 games.
My game 4. I think this is my Eldar match.
Yeah. So you've got an Autarch Wayleafer and a Farseer and a Spirit Seer, and then 10 Guardians, and then 2x5 Rangers, 2x3 Shroud Runners, Warwalker, 5 Wraith Guard with Wraith Cannons, a Wraith Knight. God, will everybody please stop putting scatter lasers on the Wraith Knight when you can have Star Cannons? Come on, people. Like, it's so much better. And then he's actually got 2 Wraith Knights and a Wraith Lord. So very, very small number, heavy unit.
Very heavy Wraith.
Yeah.
This is not unlike the last game I described. If you have towering, you kind of have my number.
Do the pigs like mortal wounds?
They do not. They have a feel no pain, but I hold on longer than you might think because of the feel no pains and just sort of being clever about it. But I do not hang out here for very long. I do kill one of the Wraith Knights eventually, but it turns out they have an OC-10, and we end up with one objective at the center at the end of the game that is worth all the points. So it doesn't matter that I play a really good game up until that point. He gets like 30 points to end the game or whatnot. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's worse then.
I think the Wraith Knight's base is also big enough that you can't be on the objective without being in close combat with it, but that could be wrong.
That is not a problem for me. I would never want to be on an objective and not also be in close combat with you. But it also means that it is important, though, because I can only get so many guys also on the objective with him. And then things like put his little War Walker in there as well to like really bunch it up so that I could only put 2 or 3 guys on there. And then he's like, well, I have, 10. Go. I don't think I was getting out of this game. I did spend too much time trying to kill Wraith Knights, and if I had just accepted them and stayed focused on killing everything else, I may have been able to outpoint him. But I would love to play this game again, but it wasn't terribly interesting the way it got played. Right? I was a shooting gallery, and everything that he put forward to block me from moving got killed while he shot at me. Pretty straightforward.
All right, I think the next game we should talk as little about as possible in the spirit of our friend JT Steiger.
Well, I do want to talk about cosmic alignment and how it works.
Let me talk about his list.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, so this is JT Steiger, one of the best hobbyists in our entire community, and also the guy who runs the Aegis store, which we've talked about. So he's got Bellicor, a Skull Taker, and then the Sloppity Bow Piper, my favorite name. Unit of 10 Bloodletters, unit of Blue Horrors, 2 units of Nurglings, a unit of Pink Horrors, a unit of 6 Blood Crushers, and then 3 Flamers, 3 Flamers, 5 Seekers, Skull Cannon, Soul Grinder. Seems like a list that Chuck would play.
I definitely love everything that's in there. Let's get back to that cosmic thing I'm talking about.
Okay.
Every time I decide, you know what? instead of doing what I normally do, I'm going to play orcs. JT says to himself, I'm going to go ahead and play my demons this time. And then we get matched into each other, and we prove once again that in the demon versus orcs matchup, orcs do better. Demons use invuln saves, and orcs use volume low AP. We just do so much damage to them that it really is not something they can handle well. Also, one of my main practice partners is plays orcs, so I'm very accustomed to a bunch of things trying to get into me while I'm also doing close combat. I have my 20-man Gretchen unit.
And you also play demons. You have all the information about the
I know
matchup.
everything. Yeah, I've played it on both sides, right? Like, so I launch my trash units up in front. He has no choice but to charge into them or not score primary. And then he runs out of trash units to fight my trash units with, and then I get to charge into his good stuff with my good stuff. End of game. You're muted, Colin.
Round 6, you had Walt.
Yeah.
Walt's last name is Muswa? I don't know. Sorry, Walt. Walt's got too many vowels in his last name. I'm out. So he had Thousand Suns, Magnus, and then a Thousand Suns Terminator, Sorcerer and Terminator armor. Chuck, before I talk about the rest of this, actually at the end of this list, can you talk about why there's so few characters in it? Because I thought that was really weird. So Magnus, Thousand Suns Sorcerer, 10 rubrics with flamers. No, 10 rubrics with 10 rubrics with flamers, 10 rubrics with guns. What's the talking we're hearing in the background? Weird.
Nope.
Mutilith Vortex Beast, Terminators, both 5s. No, a 10 and a 5, and then Cultists, and then 2 Forge Fiends. So why is there only 2 characters in this Thousand Suns list? Because I've never seen that.
Well, he is a true Thousand Suns enthusiast.
Okay.
So one of the things that he's not going to do is put Magnus and Aramon into the army together. They hate each other. They never hang out. They're banned from picnics. Like, they do not chill. So he's not going to bring that in as well. And from that point, I think 4 is usually kind of the right level. And I think he's brought it down to 2. Is that right? Or is it 3? Just 2. So I think when he puts that own low restriction on himself, he's kind of at the right place. Putting that low restriction on yourself is pretty bad from an army building standpoint, right?
Just 1 second, Chuck. Hank, you're the one with the background noise, and I think it might be louder on the end result than it is for us right now. So if you just want to mute yourself when you're not talking, that'd be awesome. Sorry, go ahead, Chuck.
Okay. So that's why I don't think that even he offered that he didn't feel like that was optimal, right? Like, he doesn't think that's the best choice, but he also really loved his army. I could tell by the level of knowledge he had in it, and his interest. Also incredibly well painted. I see very few Magnuses that I think are painted better than mine. So huge shout out to him for that work.
Okay.
Game wise, it was very interesting. What we call the standard for my army, right? Push some beast nagas into the center. He responds with Terminators, and he responds with putting his 10 Flamer rubrics out where he can get a cheesy Overwatch on me if I come to the center as well. I move a lot of things so that they are just outside of 12 of those Flamer rubrics, but within charge range of the Terminators. And then I run 1 unit of the other unit of beast nagas up the side, so that it can charge those 10 Flamer rubrics. They don't do a ton to me in Overwatch. And turns out I blow directly through them in close combat. I probably killed them twice over. Very unnecessary levels of violence occurred there. And then everything else went into the Terminators. The one thing I know about Scarab Occult Terminators is they can't actually fight them. They can't fight out of a wet paper bag. Like, it seems good, but there's the lower volume and the lower AP. They just don't actually get the job done against basically anything of any toughness.
It's weird because they're so good at shooting, and like in previous editions, they were good at both, and so it's really strange that they're like, oh no, we're in combat.
Strength 5 is not what Strength 5 used to be.
Yeah.
And if I put in Toughness 7 into you, and then I'm also popping -1 to be wounded, your unit sucks. Like, it just wrecked, and then I feel no pain on top of that, right? Like, it's just never-ending sadness for them. So took one of his main units and said, "You're not going anywhere." I killed the other one, and then I let Magnus go free. The problem is Mazrog is floating around going, "Hey Magnus, you want to come over here and touch any of these big units? Because if you do, I'm definitely going to destroy you. And if you don't, your shooting is bad, but it is not. It's only half your damage output." I just kept bullying him into that half space while overwhelming the board. And slowly but surely, we both ran out of armies. But we both ran out of armies late enough in the game that I had a ton of points. And he, like, between draws and positioning and stuff, he just wasn't able to climb back out of the hole I'd put him in fast enough. So Magnus stood triumphant at the end over nothing.
That's great. All right, so Hank.
Actually, before we go into that, I also want to sort of talk about my end here as well.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chuck.
Yeah, so I made the same choice you did. I think that out of all the games I played, that one I just discussed was the one that was the kind of interesting that I like in 40K, where it's intricate, sort of back and forth, pushing on each other, making decisions, and then trying to outsmart each other and everything. And I really enjoyed that one game. But the other games I previously were all kind of sort of decided to some point, without, input from me other than the list that I decided to bring with me.
Okay.
So I decided to go home. I didn't drop until basically it was time for me to go to bed, because I was, thinking about it back and forth with I was offered a D&D game with my family on Sunday, and I was like, well, you threaten me with a good time, I'll take it. So it worked out that I just didn't go to the end of it as well. Looking at the bracket that I was in, I would give myself fair chances of winning my bracket, but not guaranteed. There's plenty of people in that group that either I don't know, or that I have a ton of respect for, and decent lists that would have given me trouble. I would like.
But you also might have just been handed Eldar or handed Knights. Like,
yeah,
there was also just one of the frustrations for an army like Orcs is like, yeah, come the next day, you might have one game.
Yeah, well, that's actually one of the things I considered doing, was getting up and coming in the morning, playing my first game. If I do get handed Knights or whatnot that just picks me up immediately, I just like, okay, great, I'm out, bye. Right? Or if I'm within one game of winning, going for it. But in the end, I don't know. I didn't feel like the winning or placing was that important to me, and I wanted to have something in my weekend that I enjoyed more than I had so far.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you guys. There's been a lot of talk about list disparity, right? Like how games being decided at the list construction phase. Do we feel like that's more of a symptom of a new edition, and a lot of people are learning, and most people have not figured it out yet, like necessarily, or
it's interesting. I'm sorry, Mitch. I talked over your question rather than letting you finish. Go ahead.
Is it more of like the novelty is creating, people haven't gotten that experience yet, or is this more of a feature of 10th, like that it's just, if you don't build a good list, period, you're just like, if you can't, like, there are certain tenets that if you're not building into a list, like games are getting decided, or third option, is it just that there are mechanics in the game that counter certain armies, period? So a lot of armies are just forced into this sort of binary thing, like you were talking about with the Knights and the Lancers. Sorry.
So that's a great question. And I talked to 4 judges at length because they're friends, people I knew really well. I talked to Salty John, and I talked to Curry, and I talked to 2 other guys who I see all the time, whose names I never remember. Sorry, guys. Mitch, who's the judge who's got the fade on the sides and the really good hair over the top?
Oh man,
because I like him a ton. I'm sorry if you're listening. I literally can't remember your name, but every time we talk, I enjoy it.
Oh man, it's on the tip of my brain. When I remember, I'll let you know. But yes,
yeah, he used to own the reason his hair is so cool is he used to own a hair salon. We had a whole conversation about it. Anyways, in chatting with the judges, I asked each of them, "What do you think?"
I feel really bad.
What do you think is good? I feel bad too, because we had a great conversation. The question I asked is, what do you think of 10th edition? What's good and what's bad? All of them, to a man, said the core rules are great. The indexes are a mess. And I absolutely agree with that vibe. I think that the 10th edition rules are fine. I even think that Towering's fine. I even think that Indirect Fire is fine. I even think that Overwatch is fine. I think that it's the armies that you're giving these rules to. If knights were slightly less durable, like Hank and I have talked about multiple times, if knights were slightly more expensive even than they are right now, like there's lots of things you could do to knights that would make towering less valuable, and also what terrain you put it on matters. So all 4 of them said it's the indexes that are the problem. And I enjoyed the core rules. However, like I talked about on This Week in 40K, I think the cards are dumb now. I like the cards a lot, but now that I've played a lot of games with them, now they're just, oh, this thing came up. Okay. I already have that planned in my army, so I'll just do the thing my army's planned to do. Anyways, I think that the list mismatches are just the game right now. And also, I think that if this had happened 15 years ago, it wouldn't be this bad. But now we have the internet, and we've developed this communication funnel for 40K that's massive. A list gets broken, and we talk about it on a list that does well at a tournament. We talk about it on This Week in 40K. The stat check guys go into it. Art of War talks about it. All the coaches at Art of War talk about it. And it goes out on the internet, right? So a lot of the people I played against had Eldar lists that I promised they didn't write, right? Like there was a lot of just, I grabbed this list from the internet and it's just better than my opponents, and I can't stand that. So that's my feelings on that. I thought that the indexes were the entire problem as to why I didn't have a better time. Chuck, what do you think?
I agree with that. I do want to say with Mitch's question that you asked it in a binary. Which of these things do you think is the problem? I think they're all the problem. I think
which is the more of the problem is probably a better way to have asked that. I apologize.
I think no, it's all pieces, and I think it's a good way to have that part of the conversation. I think as we get better and we learn more about the edition, some of this will smooth out. I think as the indexes gets hopefully some high levels of correction, that'll smooth out, right? I am really enjoying the games that aren't mismatched. I've been playing a lot of intentionally, let's just learn to play the game, so let's not just destroy each other with the most competitive thing. Like, let's learn how the charge phase works now. You have to basically have a gentleman's agreement with your opponent of like, we're playing a game, we're going to learn about the charge phase, so please don't just guns me off the table, right? Like, bring some of your own stuff. But those are interesting and good. I actually was really upset at the changes to close combat, and now that I have played it and learned it, I think it's fine. I enjoy it quite a bit. It is a different puzzle to solve than it was before, but it is not less interesting.
So, one thing about that, Chuck uses his giant base pigs and takes one that's farther away and puts him on the edge of the close combat so the other ones can't get around it to overcome the you have to base if you can.
Yeah. And
Chuck, that hadn't occurred to me, and it's so great on those big bases.
Yeah.
Where you're just like, I'm charging this thing, clang, clang, at 45-degree angles on either side of it. Now everybody else has to be filled in the middle rather than having to run past, which can be really problematic.
Oftentimes I want to send in the pigs, a unit of boys with a boss, and Mazrog, and you got to make sure, like, you get one lucky high charge roll, and you just, if you just mob all the way around that unit, nobody else is.
No, Mazrog can't get in.
Yeah, but if you use the pigs first, you can use their weird oval-shaped bases to hinder yourself to positivity. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm really enjoying learning.
Yeah. So you said yesterday, I want to come over and I want to play a game of 40K that doesn't have towering and doesn't have indirect fire.
Yeah.
And then we decided I'm also not going to play Eldar. And once we had made those 3 decisions, I brought Tyranids and you brought Orcs, and we had an amazing game of 40K. Yeah, the game of 40K we had that was so good that I'm considering running an RTT here at the house in the next few weeks where you don't get to bring the S tier. No towering, no indirect fire, and then no Eldar, no Custodes, no Gene Stealer Cult, and no Knights. And I think that sounds like the most fun weekend. You know, like Hank's there with Grey Knights and I'm there with Tyranids. Like it's just the game has these things that are just not fun. Even in my case, even when I was playing as it.
Yeah, and that's really weird for me. I don't like that space. I don't like the space where we have to sort of try to agree to play at a lesser level because it's not easily communicated what that lesser level is, and one person takes more advantage than the other person. Like, there's a lot of difficulty in doing that, but it is also the only way I'm enjoying my games. So it's put me in a complicated space, but I do have it gives me a lot of hope that I'm in a space that I'm not comfortable with, and I'm playing the game and having a good time in that space. When the space that I am comfortable with gets fixed up and looks pretty and nice, I think I'm going to have a great time with this edition.
I agree. Hank, you haven't had a chance to talk about this topic.
So I think that a lot of lists do kind of get decided at matchup. I think that's kind of always been true for 40K. Like skews are always going to have games like that. I feel like that was very true in 9th. It was definitely true in 8th. It was certainly true in 6th and before. So I don't really actually think that's new. I think that it's a brand spanking new edition, and everyone really only has like one way they think they can play their list, because a lot of these indexes only lend themselves towards one successful build or one successful theme you can thrust into. For some of them, there's a little bit, like if you're a more creative list writer, there are some deeper themes you can go into, but that's like stuff that you get 6, 10, 12 months into an edition. We're not even 2 months into this edition yet. I also think that GW terrain is fairly transformative, and this is the first big event that's used GW terrain. Yes. And I know that every person that I encountered at the Tacoma Open that runs events in the Pacific Northwest is doing their level best to try to be able to replicate GW terrain at their events now. So many people I know are looking at like plastic manufacturers looking for plexiglass plates they can get. So I think there's all that. I'm enjoying the game at the moment, but then again, I also I ran in, played a whole bunch of different games of 40K looking for an army that could fit my playstyle. Tried Grey Knights, like can't beat Knights, can't do that. Guard just are too one-dimensional. Marines, I don't own any of the things that are good with Marines. It's also very one-dimensional. And then I fell onto Custodes. I was like, hey, Custodes actually have the ability to do damage in multiple phases, exist on the table, and not get blown away. It checked all my boxes, and so I went with Custodes.
But I would say that I agree with you that there's always games that are decided at matchup. I agree with that. I think that Custodes literally say to every army, whether you're playing your version or Steve's army, can you kill Custodes fast enough? And everyone says no. So like, I agree with you that the matchups are often like that in 40K. Right now, I think that even average lists from the better armies create that problem. So when you say that armies can't go deeper, like I think Eldar is actually a great example of that. As broken as Eldar is, Eldar has one thing. I'm going to shoot you efficiently. I'm not going to durably hold the table. I'm not going to close combat you unless it's the Avatar or the Incarn. And I'm just going to shoot at you. And my shooting is just better than yours. And so it's like, what do you do that's better than that? And then anything you do from that realm just beats large portions of the game. So that's where I think. But I do want to answer Space Marine Steve's question because I think it's really good. He says, do you think that even if the Codex has come out and balance issues remain, the community will ever go back to self-management like we did in 7th, or will GW handle it before then? I have a strong opinion about this. I am very unhappy with 40K right now. I just left one of the biggest tournaments I've ever been to early. Like, I'm really frustrated. That said, GW has shown us over the last 2 years that they are all in on making the game fun. The initial changes to Eldar were great. They weren't enough, but I appreciate GW doing the Tyranid and Drukhari thing and such from the previous edition where they're like, here's a nerf, here's a nerf, here's a nerf, rather than you're crushed and you don't get to play anymore. But I think that, there's armies that are terrible, that are like not put on the table bad, that don't make any sense. And there's armies whose rules look like they were written without any playtesting. And I think that the level of lack of playtesting of the indexes is insulting, and we have every justification to be critical of GW about it. That said, the point changes and balance changes over the last few years give me every bit of confidence. I think that they didn't want to give us indexes before codexes. I think that the indexes were made as a band-aid for a bigger problem. We want to rewrite the entire game. We have these codexes we're working on. They're really involved and interesting. What the hell do we do in the meantime? And I think that we're being punished as customers by the what the hell do we do in the meantime? But that is so negative. We should move on and talk about Hank's games.
My opinion on what Colin just commented on is, okay, cool. Like all those things, are they negative? Sure. Go ahead and do an analysis for me. If you're at home and you're listening to this, ask yourself deep in the core of your soul, what's better, 10th ed index hammer or 8th ed index hammer, because I will go to the mat. 10th ed is miles better, even with all the broken nonsense. The most broken shenanigans that has come out of 10th ed index hammer cannot hold a candle to what index hammer was like in 8th ed when the edition had just come out. You know, that magical time before the rule of 3 existed. Like,
well, that was a long time. It wasn't.
I actually don't agree with Hank, having played in both. I think that the level of broken, that Eldar came out at is better than anything that was. I played in those tournaments. Mitch went to BAO in Index Hammer. Like, we played in that meta, and there was nothing as bonkers as Eldar came out as.
No. I don't know, man. Like, I played against that freaking chaos list that just brought 50 sanctioned psychers or whatever it was, and they just mortaled you off the table.
Malefic Lords.
Yeah, Malefic Lords. 15. I don't think there's literally nothing that Eldar have that touch the Malefic Lord spam list.
I will put an even more important point on the table to end this with. Neither of those is acceptable. Comparing them to each other, trying to figure out which one is best, doesn't matter.
It's not helpful.
Okay, so we're 2 hours and 15 minutes in, and we have 7 more games to talk about.
I have one question for Hank.
6 more games to talk about.
Okay, go ahead.
One question.
Sure.
What profiles or what things do custodes fear? Not for an army necessarily or anything like what when you're looking at your opponent's list, you're like, oh, that gun does this, or what is it that like, just because this has been a lot of doom and gloom of like some some things that are issues. Like, let's help the people who are listening. What are the things they should be evaluating their codex for capabilities to try and have some sort of play into custodes?
Anything that is damage 4, damage 3 doesn't hurt. And you want 2 to 3 points of AP. Just because you have 4 up invuln saves, so more than 2 or 3 points of AP is wasted. If you want to try to assault, you want multiple high damage assault units, even just 2, because that way you're throwing one away and forcing them to fight first there. If you force them to fight first there, that might actually mean that they don't have enough CP to -1 damage over here. And so, like, if you can do that, that's a good thing that you can do. Like I said, damage 4 so that you can still one-shot custodians even through the -1 damage strat. Mostly the thing that you want to do is, if you're going to hit custodians, you want to hit them as uniformly as possible with as much as you possibly can to overtax their defensive strat economy. Because if you can do that, if you can force that, custodians will start taking more damage than they are designed to take, and that's how they lose. Mostly, the big thing, the worst thing that you can do is to just save up, and then try and put everything into one unit all at one time, just because that lets them concentrate all of their defensive stuff onto a single unit, and it gates all of your damage through the best filters that they can imagine. You want to hit them as wide as possible.
So always be hitting 2 at least. Got it.
Always be hitting 2 at least. Also, it doesn't work so much against my list, but especially if someone's going to look, Steve Trimble's list is going to far more easily to replicate, especially on GW terrain. That is a list that is going to get spammed. If you can spread out, because that list fights 3 things a turn in close combat,
unless you're near each other, unless you bulk your stuff up.
If you bunch up, then they can go charge multiple things. But if you spread out all the way around the table and make it to where if you want to kill something, you have to leave an objective, that is a problem for that list. So spreading out, hitting things as uniformly as possible, those are things that you need to be thinking about when you're playing against custodians.
Okay, so just take bulk, 4 damage shooting. Moving on.
I mean, yeah, pretty much.
And shoot at more than one thing.
Yes, with all the bulk 4 damage shooting that you brought.
And charge in with 2 highly valuable units, but don't focus on one of their units at a time.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
Sounds totally easy to solve.
Moving on.
Just anything that's helpful is useful.
All right. So Hank, we should go very quickly through some of these. But your next game is the Gene Steele Occult game.
Yes.
So
Gene, go ahead.
I have to tell him the list. So you played Ryan Lynn. Ryan is also very accomplished in our area. He has the pretty standard GSC list with all the characters. He has 2 bomb units. He took 3 units of 20 neophytes, 10 aberrants, and 5 ridge runners. That's basically the list. Go ahead.
Okay, so this game comes down to the fact that my Gene Stealer tech works like a charm. I am able to position my gigantic unit of custodians in the middle of the table, deployed in Mystic formation, and because of that, his bomb units cannot come in to attack it. I have my units of Alor's Terminators in the sky, and so I force a really bad engage turn on him, where he brings a unit of bombs down and just kind of like hides them. And just waits, basically setting up to where, okay, cool, I can't deep strike on you, but I can definitely make it to where if you walk towards this objective, I can come out and then bomb you. I won't have nearly as many buffs, but I'll get to at least make the attacks, all that kind of stuff. And then he brings down all of his 20-man units and rips into the big unit as much as he possibly can. I didn't know that the D3 shot las cannons are blast on the Ridge Runners. So he comes in and he actually does a pretty good job. Like, he kills that unit down to like the captain and like 2 guys left, which is more damage than I was expecting to take. However, he doesn't do anything to the wardens. And so on the movement phase of that turn, I rapid ingress down the Alor's Custodian brick. And the turn that happens after that is the most heinous clapback I have ever seen in any of 40K, in any of 40K I've ever played. The Alor's Terminators come out of cover, point their grenade launchers and their axe guns at one 20-man unit of Neos, and I put like 51 -1 AP saves on it, and it just explodes in a blood mist. I then have the Wardens advance and charge to another 20-man unit of Neos, blow that away in assault. The Alorus then charge another unit, and they blood miss that. So I kill like literally like 66 models with just 2 units on that clapback turn. And the best thing is I'm able to roll low enough on the charge for the Alorus and use the charge move blocking tricks that Chuck's talking about to keep the Alorus clustered up to where they end their charge move completely within 6 inches of the Mystic, so he can't then bring his other bomb unit in to hit that. And then the other bomb unit that just can deep strike onto the table, I moved a tank towards it and then just charged it because they don't have any way to fall back and shoot. And that tank and that bomb unit just sat in combat for the rest of the game. And I was like, I am completely okay with the state of affairs. This tank doesn't have anything to really shoot anyway, so I'm just going to make sure these bombs never get to go off. And the story of this game is mostly Alorus kill a gajillion guys every time they pop out. And Mystic says bombs never get used on anything of value during the course of the game. And just las cannons and just seismic cannons is not enough to deal with the custodian bricks that I have. And that is beginning, middle, and end of how that game went.
Great. Next up, you play Derek Post, based on the 87-29 outcome. I'm thinking it went really bad for Derek. He has Abaddon, Demon Prince with Wings, Master Possession, 10 Terminators, 5 Chosen? Yeah, 5 Chosen, Obliterators, Possessed, and a Bloodthirster. Go.
Yep. So this is the list where I actually got introduced to the fact that if you just charge all 3 of my units at once, you will kill some custodians because I do not have enough strats or CP to turn on all of my stuff across all of those units. And I also got introduced to absolutely how much Abaddon slaps in close combat in this edition. I did not realize he slapped as hard as he did. The game basically ends up with we both meet in the middle of the table and we both fight each other. I have the Caladius guns that help me deal with his obliterators. We both just have a big blood mess in the middle of the table. I end up with the Warden unit surviving, and the other 2 units just get wiped, but also wipe out what they were fighting. And then I end the game with a couple of tanks, a couple of units of shenanigans, and the Warden unit, and he gets tabled. And that's pretty much that game. So now there is play there where he could have played things a bit better, because there is one turn where he actually did send in just the Possessed brick with the character, and it just got blendered, and he was like, oh, I had no idea that Custodes could do that. If you would have manipulated that a little bit better and hit everything at once, it's entirely possible my line could have been bent all the way back and I wouldn't have had enough to recover. But because he kind of was a little bit inefficient with that,
He didn't quite have enough when he came in. But like I said, I took real damage in the assault phase. I lost 2 of my 3 custodian bricks to melee. So custodians can be knocked down in close combat. You just have to know what you're doing, and you have to have multiple high threat assault modes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Then you fight your friend Jaden, which you talked about earlier.
I do fight my friend Jaden. Jaden is an amazing guy. I've known Jaden for over a decade at this point. We actually go back. We were both fairly highly competitive War Machine and Hordes players about a decade ago, and we both transitioned over to 40K just because the game community for that game kind of fell apart. For reasons that are not relevant to this. But we play
Night Warden. Yes. Helverin, Warglaive. So 6 Warglaive, 5 Warglaives, 2 Helverins, Warden, Canis.
Yep. And this is an Imperial Knight game, and I come tech for Imperial Knights. I go first. I drop Canis Rex down to 7 wounds. He shoots back, doesn't really do anything. On my next turn, I use my shooting to drop the Warden down to 2 wounds. The Wardens themselves charge Canis Rex, kills him. Canis Rex explodes and does the last 2 wounds to the Warden with the explosion.
Gross.
And that's top of 2. Both big knights are dead, and he has no bondsman abilities anymore. And it's just me slowly playing cleanup as he tries to run around with armigers and run the score up as much as he can. But I end up winning the game because he doesn't have any big knights that can threaten me with. And that's pretty much that game.
Yeah, and I don't have any information on the Shadow Round. I don't know who you played or anything.
Okay, so the Shadow Round I played half conscious against it was my first game with Custodes into Necrons in the entire thing. Broadly speaking, he had 2 units of 2 heavy destroyers. He had 2 the Doomsday Arcs. Yeah. He had the unkillable Catan Shard with the enhancement for the 4+2 no pain after having all the damage. He has 2 of the unkillable Lichguard bricks. He has 2 or 3 of the Hexmark destroyers. He has a couple of units of trash in there. And basically, I get to go first. Oh, no, sorry. He gets to go first. He moves up kind of conservatively. And I am, at this point, half awake. And I'm just like, I just want to go home. And everything I've been told about Necrons is that they are very durable, but they don't have a lot of damage output. So I'm just like, well, I get to go home and sleep sooner if I do this. So I just decide full gas and run my army directly into his face. Both like the Wardens pop their advance in charge, and the Guardians walk up and charge the unkillable Catan Shard. And I'm like, nope, I'm taking these objectives. If you want to throw your entire Necron army to try and take these objectives off of 2 units of Custodians, be my guest, bring those Lichguard out, let's go. Wipe out pretty much everything that I engage. I force the Catan Shard to back off. It only has like 2 wounds left. And then both the Lichguard units come in, and like across 5 or 6 fight phases, Custodian Guard plus Lichguard does slowly end in favor of the Custodian Guard, but it's a very close run thing. However, the Custodian Guard are all OC3 each, while all of the Lichguard are only OC1 each. And because of that, the entire time we're chopping at each other. I'm controlling the objectives the entire time because my OC is just so much higher than his is. And then the thing that ends the game is he leaves his backfield open. I rapid ingress the Terminators down and then charge them onto his objective, tagging and then killing both of the whatever they're called, Doomsday Arcs on the turn when I flipped the capture enemy outpost for 8 points on his home objective. And he takes so much damage then, and I shut him out on two consecutive 15s that by the end of turn 3, we just call the game because I've taken such a commanding lead and we both want to go home and sleep.
I actually felt a little bit about that when I was playing Trimble. Part of the reason I wasn't playing better is I was just like, I'm tired, and if I'm done with this, I get to go home to my dog.
Exactly.
Yeah, I feel that. So then you go to bed for some number of hours.
Yes,
I know I talked to you. I talked to you at 1 o'clock in the morning. I tried to be motivational. Remember, I was like, "Hey, you can do this."
Yep.
I like get some sleep. You're going to be fine. And then you played Matthew Geyer in the morning. He's playing Chaos, and I love reading Matthew Geyer's list Because it's literally Be'lakor, Shalaxi, Bloodthirster, Lord of Change, Lord of Change, Lord of Change, 6 Flamers, 3 Flamers, 3 Flamers.
Yep, that's the whole list.
End of list.
Well, turns out that Custodes are really, 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 really good integrator demons because they have only so many threat vectors and they have only so many units they can threaten at the same time. And GW terrain says I get to not be shot by Lords of Change until I feel like being shot by Lords of Change. And I have the this is one of those matchups where the Mystic actually came in handy against non-GSC because I was able to kick the Mystic up and use that to keep the Wardens safe from being deep struck on by Be'lakor moving up in Shadow of Chaos, deep striking guys and getting 6-inch charges and all that. But mostly he ends up putting the Bloodthirster and Shalaxi into the unit of Custodian Guard. And he ends up using all of Shalaxi's precision attacks and then the epic dual strat from the Bloodthirster to just put a load of damage into the shield captain who's in charge of that unit. I end up making a disproportionate amount of 4+ and vulnerable saves. So he ends up just barely killing the shield captain and then killing one shield guy in overflow. And then I do an amount of damage to both of the greater demons in reply. My turn comes. The Caladiuses both slide out, and they both zero in on Shalaxi. And Shalaxi takes like 34 damage between the two of them because I roll 2 consecutive 11s for damage, and he just fails enough feel no pains to where Shalaxi blows up in close combat. The Bloodthirster then gets charged by the Wardens. The Bloodthirster explodes and does 5 mortals to Be'lakor, who had heroically intervened. Because Be'lakor heroically intervened on the Wardens pop their 4+ feel no pain, and he didn't kill any Wardens. Then on my turn, Be'lakor dies. The Terminator's rapid ingress down, charge Lord of Change in the back, and that's his army just falls apart at that point because I've killed like 4 of the 6 greater demons, and he doesn't have any real melee threat, and it's just me cleaning the game up. This game is also on stream in case anyone is looking for a less rushed play-by-play.
I've in particular that list is really built to try to take on a shooting meta, and
Yes.
you were like, nah.
Yeah. They're like, he said straight up that this list is built to punish Eldar and Towering.
Yeah.
And it
does
does.
a great
Like,
job of it. But
It just curb stomps Eldar and Towering Knight builds. However, it falls flat against Custodes because it's a whole bunch of melee punch that can go toe to toe with his top tier.
Yeah.
And then naturally, Hank played the Custodes Mirror in the final round, which, by the way, who had Custodes Mirror in the final round on their bingo card? Because I certainly didn't. I would have guessed, I would have maybe said Hank or Trimble Custodes into Tyler GSC at the start of the event. I might have guessed that, but I certainly wouldn't have guessed Custodes Mirror.
Yep, definitely.
Steve's list is basic. There were several people playing this list at the tournament. I know that Naj was also playing it. Shield Captain with Ceaseless Hunter. What's that?
Ceaseless Hunter is once per game when an enemy unit ends a normal move, advance, or fallback move within 9 inches of this unit gets to move 6 inches. Also, the unit gets to fallback, shoot, and charge.
Yes, very good. Then a Shield Captain, then Trajan. Now, I know that Steve didn't like that he had Trajan, even though Trajan was amazing against me.
So the reason why he hated him is because Trajan had a ruling at the event so Trajan says none of the characteristics of my guys can be modified. Well, they interpreted the rule as saying Trajan's unit doesn't actually ignore -1 damage modifiers because it's not a stat of the guys that's being modified, it's a stat of their weapons. And so because of that, Trajan doesn't ignore. The whole reason why he took it is because he was like, if I play the mirror, I want Trajan's unit to be able to ignore the -1 to damage strat, and it just doesn't.
Yeah. Okay, then he's got 3x10 Custodian Guard, and then 1 unit of 5 Prosecutors. He's got a Calidus, which against me, he used to action, pick up, put down in action, which I thought was really baller.
He also has 2 units of cops.
Yeah, and 2 units of cops as well.
Yeah,
which I thought were obnoxious for 35 points in the game I played against them.
So this game is like, again, this game is also on stream if anyone wants to go watch. This game, I was like, okay, and like in my interview after I played in the semifinals, they asked me what I thought my matches were in the Trimble, and I was just like, well, I really don't like my matchup into Trimble. If Steve gets to go first, it's really, really, really bad for me, and I basically just have to go, well, here we go. Let's see if the dice give it to me, and just throw everything in, start rolling dice, and see if I can roll more fours than Steve does. If I get to go first and I get to start the damage race in his deployment zone before he moves out, I think I have a chance. However, Steve wins the roll to go first, and he just is able to put 30 custodian guard, like millimeters, or like either right off objectives or onto the objectives themselves. And I'm like, okay, I have absolutely no play here. So I'm just going to do what I can. I'm going to hit Steve in the face as hard as I possibly can. And if his jaw breaks, then I win the game. If it doesn't, then then I lose the game. And to my credit,
assault your opponents. Not
yeah. I mean, sure. I like the jaw of his army. There you go. Definitely. Metaphorical jaw. Yes. I go in, the whole army charges his whole army. I walk up, I shoot, I just go in guns blazing. And to my credit, after this first turn, Steve told me he thought he lost the game in that turn, because I go in, and of 33 custodians that are across the board from me, my first turn accounts for 19 of them.
And this is when I received 6 text messages from different people that all said that Hank was going to trash Steve.
Yeah. Like, I just went in, and it was just like, I roll really hot. The Caladiuses themselves killed like 7 guys. I killed more with the full reroll to wound shooting from the like 9 of those guys were just from shooting. And then I got into combat. I killed Trajan with the Terminators through his 2+ invulnerable save, because the Trajan himself ended up having to take like 30 something saves, and he just rolled enough ones to where he died through his 2+. And then Steve clapped me back, and we just kind of got into a scrum in the middle. I end up killing every custodian in the list. And my comment for this game is I killed every custodian guard, and then I lost the game to the help, because he had 3 units of trash just around the board doing actions that I didn't have the same number or ability to contest. And because I had to use all my trash just to hold my side of the table while I committed everything to the center. He had an extraneous unit of trash in the back. He had the assassin, and he had 2 units that he could put in reserve that came into my deployment zone that just went, oh, cool, sweet. Cleanse? Cool, we're going to cleanse this objective and cleanse this objective. Oh, wait, teleport homers? We're going to double deploy teleport homers in your deployment zone and get 5 points. And he got at least 8 points on every secondary card that he flipped every turn. And he ends up winning the game by 30-something points. Almost every one of those points is in the secondary column. Mm-hmm. And that is basically what happened. I won the attrition in the middle and lost to my lack of flexibility on secondaries, because I teched a little bit too hard in the GSC.
Aside from going first, Hank, what could you have done differently in the game to make it better for you?
Oh, I absolutely would have changed my list slightly because I had the unit of 5 Flamer Ladies. Would have been strictly better if it would have been a unit of 4 Bolter Babes and a unit of 5 Cops.
No, but that's changing your list. What at the table? Sure. Is there anything you could have done differently?
It's possible that I could have, at the bottom of my first turn, I could have, upon Golden Light, removed the 6-man of Alaris Terminators from the table and deep struck them on the bottom of turn 1 into his deployment zone and blown his trash unit off of his home objective, which would have forced him to bring in another trash unit there and have less trash on my side of the table. But then I'm not sure that I win the fight in the middle of the table by removing those 6 custodians from that. Right. So that is a different way it could have gone.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I don't think there's much better I could have done with the list that I could have. There's there's a couple of nuanced things here or there. I could have manipulated the charge phase a little bit better. One of the big reasons why I didn't completely blow them out in the center is because my first unit that charged
aced an 11-inch charge on the charge roll, and I couldn't do enough movement jank to stop them from having to fully wrap one of the units. And that really limited the number of relevant attacks the wardens were able to get.
Yeah.
And so there's I could have rolled a little bit lower on the charge. I could have tried to do a little bit more fight phase manipulation. That's definitely, I'm going to have to go to school on the fight phase a little bit more than that. I'm happy with the game that I played for the level of prep that I had. It was a good game fought by Steve. I think it was mostly just Steve's win path didn't put him into any of the lists that I think would give him issue. Like I think that Steve's list has a real problem with GSC, and I know for a fact in the Shadow round he fought George, the guy that we talked about.
That was a 2-point game.
That was a 2-point game.
Yeah.
So mostly I think that Steve gambled real hard on a question list and went 9 rounds without hitting any lists that could answer his question. And my win path took me through several people who would have loved to have fought Steve's list, especially the Gene Stealer Cult. The Gene Stealer Cult matchup would have absolutely loved to fight Steve's list because he didn't have nearly the same tech for it that I did, and it would have been a much harder game for him. So I think it was down to matchups as much as anything else.
Yeah, I want to say 2 things about that. One is, let's not take anything away from Steve.
Oh yeah, absolutely not.
The type of army that Steve is playing is such a fit for his personality and the way he plays 40K that when I was playing him, I was actually very impressed by his close combat usage.
Oh yeah.
So he certainly knew what he was doing. I would say that had I spread out around the table, my list is actually better prepared than George's to deal with Steve.
No, definitely.
And so if I had made the thought of, hey, my stuff is fast and should be all driving in different directions from each other.
Yeah.
And Fire Prisms and Night Spinners should be move blocking.
Mm-hmm.
If I had done that, our game is actually probably on a knife's edge.
Oh, definitely.
So I would love to have that game to do over again when I'm better prepared and have slept better.
Yeah. So Steve's style is to play a very structurally strong list and then just do his level best to play error-free ball, which works very well for him. He's had loads of success with it. And he gave me 0 mistakes to exploit. So credit to him for that.
Well, and going back to there's always an element of luck winning any GT major this big. Like it's never a comment of oh, he got lucky. Anyone who wins an event, with 9-10 rounds, there's some luck involved on some level somewhere.
The skill is putting yourself at a high enough level of playing field that if you go to enough GTs, you will be the one that gets chosen.
Yep.
Yes.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what I'd like to do now, before we wrap up, because we're 2 hours and 42 minutes in, is I'd like to talk about changes we're going to make to our lists. And Hank, why don't you go first, because you just talked a lot of custodes.
Sounds good. So I already have the changes that I'm going to make. Basically, what I'm going to do is I learned, I am in love with the Alaris Custodian brick. I didn't notice at any point in that game the difference between the captain and just another 6th man to that unit who has almost the same stats. So I'm going to be dropping the Alaris Custodian captain and putting in a 6th guy to that unit. He's literally half the cost for pretty much the same guy, effectively the same guy shooting, and shooting is half of what that unit does. I'm going to use those extra points to add a 10th guy to my Custodian Guard brick, because I actually only run 9-man plus the character. So I'm going to get a 10th guy just to up the durability of that unit. I am going to cut the Flamer Lady unit, and I am going to be looking at putting a 5-man unit of cops in there, the Exaction Squad, and then a 4-man unit of just Bulger Babes. And then with the extra random 10 or 20 points I have left over, I am going to be slightly readjusting the Inquisitorial Henchman unit, and I'm going to be adding Inquisitor Draxus to that unit instead of the plain Jane guy, mostly because Draxus just... her profile is nuts.
Fire.
She has a freaking, number one, she has anti-infantry 4+ with a devastating wounds 4-shot assault 2 damage shuriken catapult. That's just, I'm just gonna, number one, I have an assault gun, so now this unit can advance and do actions, which is amazing. which would have helped me in so many matchups. Also, if I need to, I can just roll hot and do 8 mortals to some infantry casually. Also, her psychic attack is just an 18-inch range, indirect 6-shot, ballistic skill 3+, sustained hits 2, strength 6, flat damage 2 gun. So it's just, and then she just casually, her unit adds 1 to all to hit rolls when they're fighting against anything that's not Imperium or Chaos. So if I'm talking about like
and she makes them untargetable.
And she can make them untargetable, and in the Eldar matchup,
and she has a power fist. That's pretty.
And she has a power fist, yeah. Just like, and also in some random matchups, like in Guard and Eldar, if I'm fighting against freaking Night Spinners, I can just, instead of putting the captain in that unit, you can pull him out, put Draxus in that unit, and Draxus says, "But what if you just couldn't Night Spinner this unit? Because I'm playing Eldar, I don't need the free strats to kill anything in close combat. So whatever."
Yep.
So
she's such good tech for 75 points. I've been saying it since
I'm a believer. I'm gonna see what it. I'm gonna make it do what it do.
I have the model. I'm very excited to get her on the table.
Yep. And those are the small but I feel very significant changes that I'm making.
Okay, Chuck.
Also, just as an aside, I have to run now, gentlemen, because we've been here for a while and I have plans. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, everyone. Congrats on second place.
Thank you very much.
All right. Bye, Hank.
Later.
See you.
I do not have anything as specific. There's a couple things I really like about orcs. Taking up space, holding objectives while blocking people from getting to those objectives, and having medium toughness, medium wounds, multiple models. Right? Like I talked a lot about the Squig Hog Riders. I love them. The bikes, being T6, 3 wounds, and then 4 wounds on the knob are very difficult for people to find a kind of firepower that makes it convenient to get rid of them. So I'm going to try leaning into some of that space. I've been avoiding having a lot of characters and a lot of vehicles because I don't want my opponent to be able to say, bring it down and assassinate fixed objectives. This is what I'm going to do. I am going to stop avoiding that because what happens when somebody does that is they limit themselves to what that is. I want to make that an option they can pick, but also one that I can punish. So if I have enough first and second wave stuff that isn't that, and then I finish on vehicles and monsters, I think that's fine. But I need to. It's a lot of work to figure out. So it's a lot of space open up. The game yesterday with Colin, I tried out the freebooters, the flash kits, and I tried out the knobs with the power claws. The knobs with the power claws didn't super interest me. They're very high points cost for doing a job that really a squad of Beast Negas and a Beast Nega Warboss would do as well. But the flash kits shot pretty well. I used them a little too aggressively, too excitedly, I think. But if I did that differently in the future, I think they would do all right. The other thing that I thought was really interesting is I went with trucks over battle wagons. The majority of the reason I did that is I didn't want to provide an easy target for a towering, like a Wraith Knight or whatnot, to just like pick this one model up. Having now played this, I'm totally fine if they shoot their Wraith Knight at my battle wagon. That, like, great. You didn't shoot at my Squig Hog Riders. You've made an awful choice. Congratulations. This one squad of dudes is going to have to go on foot now. Whatever. I have 6 Squig Hog Riders to say hello here in a minute, right? So I think I'm in a place where I'm half into figuring out what the next thing is. I do think I'll probably keep playing orcs. I'm really enjoying the feel of how they play and what they're into. I'm interested to try it into some of this custode stuff because some of the things Hank said feel true, but some of it also feels like I might just bounce off of them. And if that's the case, can I move fast enough to prevent them from ever getting to the objectives and just sacrifice boys in front of them until they get tired of me?
Maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Like if I can move block them off the objective till turn 4, great. They wipe my army out. Cool. We're done. And I'm fine with that being the solution times. Like I don't mind sort of just drowning my opponent in boys and being like, look, I got 100 points. What'd you get? That works for me. So
how about you, Colin?
If I don't take the Wraith Knight, I have a better tournament and my army performs better. The Wraith Knight is so many points. And It also does the thing that I don't like, which is if you go first, you could take away a huge amount of value in my army, which is a thing I can't stand because that doesn't let me play. So I strat reserved it in every game but the Custodes game. No, it's not true. Against Jorge, I started on the table as well. So 4 of 6 games, I strat reserved it, which means that I didn't have it for at least one shooting phase. Further, because I did that, it meant it didn't get -1 to wound or rerolls the turn that it came in. So then I have all of these Farseer points put into giving it buffs that it just doesn't get. In addition to that, yes, it's cool to do so many mortals, but it doesn't do enough shooting for the almost 600 points of investment I put into it. So when I looked at my list when I came home, I thought, hey, I could hide everything on GW Train if I didn't have a Wraith Knight, and I could have better shooting against things like Custodes. So I actually took out the Farseer on foot. I found that -1 to wound is a waste of time in Eldar. If you can see my things die.
Yeah.
If you can't see my things don't die. And the Fire Prisms and the Night Spinners are frankly always a 2-up because you can never fully see them. So they're T9 with a 2-up and 12 wounds. It's just enough. It's just enough to make sure people have to focus, and you're phantasming and you're doing all this stuff. So without the Wraith Knight and without an Avatar or the Incarn or the Wraith Guard, I don't have anything that needs the -1. So I took that out. I left the Farseer Skyrunner and gave him the Phoenix Gem and took his friends away. And the reason I did that is because Guide on Night Spinners ended up being bonkers. I found that whenever I wasn't able to guide the Wraith Knight, I did it on the Night Spinners, and because of how good they are and how they're fishing for 6 mortals, that means you're hitting on 4s rerolling and then wounding on whatever rerolling. Very, very good. Guide is also good in other places as well, and also I need a Farseer of some sort in order to do the 6s trick, which is, I think, really, really important. So I need a Farseer, and so I'm going to do the Skyrunner. So my only 2 characters in this list are the Autarch Auto-Include and the Farseer Skyrunner. And then what I did with the rest of the points is I kept my 2 Night Spinners, and I kept my 3 Fire Prisms, but I took out the Rangers and Illic. And what that did is it gave me enough points to add 3 D-Cannons, 3 Void Weavers, and another unit of Warp Spiders. So now my list, aside from characters, is 3 Fire Prisms, 2 Night Spinners, 3 D-Cannons, 3 Void Weavers, 2 Warwalkers, and 2 Warp Spiders. I think that this is bonkers better. I think Void Weaver, basically for the price of the Wraith Knight plus its support, I'm getting 3 Void Weavers and 3 D-Cannons. And I think that is just harder to kill because it's spread out. And in a lot of games, the D-Cannons stand behind walls and don't do anything. And in other games, you strat reserve them and they come in and just wreck people like George did against me. I think that this is a better list and doesn't rely on the Wraith Knight, and I would really enjoy it, except that this is still just point-and-click guns, and that's probably not enough for me.
You've diffused it into a bunch of smaller units,
which is more fun for me. That's more of what I like.
It's also usually more durable to a mistake or a surprise.
Yes. It gives you a lot more flexibility for objectives and things like that as well.
Yeah. It's just better. And I could add the Incarn in. I could add the Incarn in and make it more interesting. But the Incarn has no play into Custodes.
What do the Void Weavers do?
They're just crazy shooting. They're really fast. They have 1 gun that's 2 shots at 4 damage each. Strength 14, I think, 4 damage each. And then they have 6 Shuriken cannon shots.
Okay. Yeah, so that's great into Custodes. Yeah, that makes that.
Yeah, so my list actually, now that I've said it out loud, my list actually needs a Viper. So probably I'm going to lose. I'm 25 points under, so probably what I'm going to do is lose a Warp Spider and put in a Viper and then have 50 points left for something cheap. And the reason for that is that when I'm shooting Custodes, I need to remove cover so that all the Shuriken cannons are doing 2 damage on a 3-up. Because 2 damage on a 2-up feels terrible. So that's the one change I'd make now that I said the list out loud. My final thoughts are that I think that 10th edition has every ability to be fun. I think that I had a bad mixture of my own personal mental health mixed with an army that I didn't think was very fun, and that made my tournament less fun. That in playing 3.5 Eldar Mirrors. Chuck, I think you articulated your feelings well, but if you want to do any final thoughts, you can certainly.
No, I did not have the best tournament ever, but I do have quite a bit of hope that we're going to have some pretty good tournaments in the course of this year. In fact, I think we will get to a pretty decent place. I'm also just, we're talking about this, very excited to see what a codex is. Right.
Yeah, and we're like 2 months from Charity Hammer, and I think the game's going to look really different 2 months from now.
Yeah.
Well, so as someone who didn't go, I'm excited from the perspective of like listening to a meta get established again and finding out what are the main predators, what are the gatekeepers. Knights being a gatekeeper, not a shocker. It's been that way every edition since they were introduced, but that they're a higher tier. I find all that really interesting. So that's what I've really enjoyed from this conversation is just, I'm like, okay, so like first turn movement, ability to move, block, mobility, spreading.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a lot of MSU viability, which I enjoy as well. And it sounds like there's a lot of board control, which is a type of 40K I like to play with a lot of models that can also exist. So I find all that really exciting.
Yeah. And I think that the meta is establishing, like you said, Mitch. And to me, it's that the S tier is Genestealer Cult, Custodes, Eldar, and maybe Knights. But I think that Knights are really one tier down from that. I think that Necrons and Space Marines are in that tier that's one down. And so I think that we're getting some pretty clear tiers of what's good. I just wish that AdMech could be on the table. And Votan could be on the table.
Yeah.
Like there's armies whose rules are so badly written that they don't get to play. And I think and Death Guard as well. And I think that that's just awful.
Yep.
So
it is a sign of a underdeveloped
rule set.
Yeah. Product.
Yeah. Yep. All right, guys, that's 3 hours of 40K. Hope you guys all enjoyed it.
Old school, man.
We always have a great time talking to y'all. And so we'll be back in 2 weeks to talk about, I have no idea what. Hopefully something interesting has happened since then. Maybe we'll do the RTT next weekend where nobody gets to take really broken stuff and we'll do a tournament report on that. I don't know. But yeah, so thank you everybody for joining us. Remember that if you want to support us, you can find this as a podcast wherever you find your podcasts. You can find this on YouTube, as you probably did. You can become a patron and come to our Discord group and really support us that way. We super appreciate it. The TNG guys, I'm sure will be ready to talk about Tacoma from a much more everybody did well point of view. And we'll be back soon. Thank you, everybody. He's Chuck and he's Mitch, and I'm calling because someone has to be. And we'll be back soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.